Victor Hale caught the maid's wrist in the hallway and squeezed until her tray shook, and he smiled the whole time. "You look at that contract one more time," he whispered, "and I will make sure your mother's hospital forgets her name." Clara Bennett didn't scream. She didn't drop a single glass. She just stared at the man who was about to steal an empire from the most feared boss in Chicago, and she understood that in 9 minutes, Adrian Cole would sign away everything he owned, and only a maid knew it. If you enjoy stories like this one, please subscribe to the channel and stay with me until the very end, because this story only makes sense when you hear all of it. And comment below with the city you're watching from so I can see how far my stories have traveled tonight. The Blackwood estate had 140 rooms, and Clara Bennett had cleaned every single one of them for 5 years without a single person learning her last name. That was not an accident. That was survival. She woke at 4:30 every morning in a 2-room apartment on the south side, boiled water for her mother's tea, laid out the pills in the order the nurse had taught her: blue ones first, then the white, then the small yellow one that cost more than the electric bill. Her mother, Ruth Bennett, 63 years old, 2 dialysis sessions a week, would take the mug in both hands and say the same thing every morning. "You're going to be late, baby." "I'm never late, Mama." "That's because you leave early. That's not the same thing as not being late." Clara would kiss the top of her mother's head, take the bus at 5:10 transfer at 5:40, and walk the last half mile up a private road lined with trees that cost more than her entire block. By 6:15, she was in the servants' corridor, putting on a gray uniform that fit her like a second skin, and by 6:30, she had already ceased to exist. That was the job, not the cleaning, the disappearing. Mrs. Whitaker, the head of house, had explained it on Clara's first day in a voice like a closing door. "You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not look Mr. Cole in the eyes. You will not linger in a room where business is being discussed. If a guest addresses you, you will answer in 6 words or fewer. If a guest touches you, you will step back and say nothing. Do you understand what I'm telling you, Miss Bennett?" "Yes, ma'am." "No, you don't. You think I'm telling you how to be polite." Mrs. Whitaker had leaned in then, and for the first time her voice had cracked into something almost human. "I'm telling you how to stay alive in this house. There are men who come through those doors who have made people vanish for hearing the wrong sentence. Your safety is your silence. Guard it like money." Clara had understood. Clara had also over 5 years heard absolutely everything. That was the thing nobody accounted for. A woman with a rag in her hand is not a person. She is a piece of the furniture that happens to move. Men talked over her the way they talked over a lamp. They said numbers in front of her. They said names. They said dates and ports and account codes and the names of judges, and they never once thought about the fact that the quiet woman polishing the sideboard had a mind like a steel trap, and nothing else in her life to fill it with. She had never used a single piece of it. Not once. She didn't want it. Information in that house was not power. It was a disease, and everyone who caught it eventually died of it. But she couldn't stop hearing, and she couldn't stop remembering. Her mother used to call it a gift when Clara was a girl, 9 years old and reciting the entire church bulletin from memory, 12 years old and correcting her teacher about a date in a textbook out loud in front of the class and getting sent to the hallway for it, 16 and told by a guidance counselor that girls from her neighborhood didn't go to schools like that, and remembering the exact tilt of his head when he said it, remembering it for 13 years, remembering it still. The gift had never fed her. The gift had never paid a hospital. The gift had only ever made her the problem in the room. So she put it away and she cleaned houses and she got good at being no one. Adrian Cole was 44 years old and had not raised his voice in 9 years, which was precisely what made everyone terrified of him. He didn't shout, he asked questions. He asked them softly one after another, and by the 4th or 5th question the man across from him would be sweating through his collar without quite understanding when the trap had closed. Clara had seen it twice. She had also seen him rebuild the roof of a church 3 blocks from where she grew up quietly through a shell company because a woman he'd never met wrote him a letter. Both things were true. She had stopped trying to make them fit together a long time ago. He had spoken to her directly exactly 4 times in 5 years. The first time he'd asked her to stop cleaning a certain window because the light was in his eyes. The second time he'd found her at 2 in the morning scrubbing a stain out of a rug in his study, and he had stood in the doorway watching her for so long she thought she was about to be fired. "What is that?" "Wine, sir," It's been there for a month. Yes, sir. It's set. It won't come up with the machine. It has to come up by hand. So you come at 2 in the morning. I come when the room is empty, sir, so I don't disturb anyone. He had looked at her for a long moment, and then he had said, How long have you been in this house? 3 years, sir. And he had nodded and gone away, and Clara had understood that he had not known she existed until that exact moment and would forget by morning. The third time was the day his dog died, and he had not really been speaking to her at all. The fourth time was on a Tuesday in October 3 weeks before the dinner, and it was the reason for everything that came after. She had been in the study alone, wiping down the long walnut table where he kept his papers. Mrs. Whitaker's rule was absolute. You do not read what is on the table. You lift, you wipe, you set it back exactly as it was. Clara had lifted a stack of pages, and her eyes, because eyes are not obedient, had crossed a line of text. It was a legal clause, dense, gray, boring. And it said in the plainest language such documents ever manage that in the event of the principal's death or incapacity, control of all holdings would pass to Adrian Cole's designated heirs and the trustee of record acting together. And she set the page down. She wiped the wood. She put the stack back at the same angle, squared to the edge exactly as she had found it. She thought about it on the bus home. Not because it meant anything to her, because that was what her brain did with words. It swallowed them and kept them whether she wanted them or not. 3 weeks later, she would be carrying a tray of scotch into a dining room full of men in $5,000 suits, and she would glance down at page 46 of a contract sitting open beside Adrian Cole's right hand, and she would read that same clause, and it would say, or. 1 word, 2 letters. And, or. But that was still hours away, and the morning of the dinner began the way every morning began, with Rosa Delgado grabbing her elbow in the servants' corridor and hissing at her. You heard. Heard what? Tonight. It's tonight. The big one. Rosa was 23 and had been in the house 8 months, which meant she still thought things were interesting. Mrs. Whitaker's been up since 3, 14 at the table, 14 Clara. I've never seen 14. Then there'll be 14 sets of glasses to polish, and you're going to be late. You're not curious. No. Liar. Rosa. Clara stopped walking and turned to face her, and something in her voice made the younger woman go still. Listen to me. Tonight, whatever you hear in that room, you leave it in that room. You don't repeat it in the kitchen. You don't repeat it to your boyfriend. You don't repeat it to your priest. Do you understand? I was making conversation. There's no such thing in this house. Rosa's face closed. You know what your problem is? You act like you're nobody. But you're not nobody. You're the only one here who notices when anything's wrong, and you just stand there and let it be wrong. Clara didn't answer. She picked up her cart and went to work, and Rosa's words sat in her chest all day like a swallowed stone. Victor Hale arrived at 4 in the afternoon, 2 hours early, the way he always did, because Victor Hale liked to own a room before anyone else got there. He was 61, silver-haired, handsome in the way that expensive men are handsome, and he had been Adrian Cole's attorney for 26 years. He had held Adrian at his baptism. He had carried Adrian's father's casket. He called Adrian kid in front of men who would have died for the privilege. He handed Clara his coat without looking at her. There's a woman, he said to Mrs. Whitaker on the north stairs, polishing. I want her gone before the guests arrive. Nobody wants to walk past a maid on their way to dinner. It reminds them of things. Of course, Mr. Hale. And the temperature in the dining room, 2 degrees cooler. Cold rooms make people sign faster. He laughed, and Mrs. Whitaker laughed, and Clara stood there holding his coat and thinking about how easily he said it, like a man discussing a recipe. Then he turned and saw her, and his face did something strange. You, he said. Sir? You've been here a while. 5 years, sir. 5 years. He studied her, not the way men usually studied her, which was not at all. He studied her the way a man studies a lock he's not sure he has the key to. Do you know what I do, sweetheart? You're Mr. Cole's attorney, sir. Do you know what an attorney is? A lawyer, sir. No, he smiled. A lawyer argues. An attorney arranges. Anybody can argue. Arranging is an art. He tapped the leather folder under his arm twice. You take good care of that coat. And he walked away, and Clara stood there with her heart going like a bird in a box, and she could not have told you why. By 6, the house had changed temperature. Not the air, the house. Cars came up the drive that had no plates. Men came through the door who did not hand over their coats and did not remove their sunglasses. Marcus Byrne, Adrian's head of security, a mountain of a man with a boxer's flattened nose and a voice like gravel in a bucket, stood in the foyer and looked at every face that entered like he was memorizing it for a police lineup. Clara passed him in the hall with an armload of napkins. Bennett. She stopped. He had never used her name before. She hadn't known he knew it. Yeah. Tonight you serve, you leave. You don't stand against the wall waiting to be useful. Every 90 seconds you're in that room is 90 seconds somebody's looking at you and wondering why. He didn't look at her when he said it. He was still watching the door. That's not me being cruel. That's me doing you a favor. Yes, Mr. Byrne. Marcus. She blinked. Marcus. 5 years, and nobody's ever called me that in this house except him. He finally glanced down at her, and there was something exhausted in his face. Just serve and go, Bennett. The dining room filled at 7:15. Elena Rossi came first, 48 sharp as a scalpel, the only woman at the table, and the only person in the room. Victor Hale never interrupted. Then Dominic Cole, Adrian's cousin, who laughed too loud and too early, and whose eyes never got the joke. Then the men from the West Side, the men from Detroit, the accountants, the money, the muscle, the whole terrible architecture of a life. And then Adrian. He came in without ceremony and sat down, and the entire room adjusted around him like iron filings around a magnet. Gentlemen, Elena. Adrian. Elena raised her glass an inch. 26 years, and you finally get out of the basement. I like the basement. The basement has a ceiling. Tonight, you're buying the sky. There was laughter. Real laughter, mostly. Clara moved along the wall with a bottle in a white cloth filling glasses invisible. Victor Hale stood and unbuttoned his jacket, and the room went quiet without being asked. I want to say something, Victor said, before we start pretending we're here for the veal. More laughter. 26 years ago, a man came to me with a shoebox. That was it. That was the whole business. A shoebox. He let it sit. He was very good. His father had just died. He was 18 years old. He had $2,000, 4 employees, and a last name that was going to get him killed inside of a year. And he sat in my office and he said, Victor, teach me how to be legal. Adrian's face didn't move. 26 years, Victor said. And tonight this man puts his signature on a piece of paper, and everything from here to the state line runs through this house. Not through a shoebox, through this house. He raised his glass. To the kid who learned. The room came up like a wave. Glasses, voices, hands, slapping the table. Clara, standing against the wall with a bottle wrapped in linen, watched Adrian Cole's face during the toast, and she saw something nobody else at that table saw. He wasn't proud. He was relieved. And underneath the relief, there was something small and young and frightened, something that had been 18 years old in an office with a shoebox and had never entirely stopped being 18. She had cleaned this man's house for 5 years and had never once thought of him as a person. She thought of him as a person now, and she was going to spend the rest of the night wishing she hadn't. The folder came out at 8:40. Victor Hale set it in front of Adrian with both hands the way a priest sets down a chalice and slid a pen across the wood beside it. 62 pages, he said. You've read 50 of them. I've read all 62 4 times. Elena's had it since Thursday. Bruno's people looked at it. It's clean. I want to go through the transfer clauses. Adrian, I want to go through the transfer clauses, Victor. You've been going through the transfer clauses for 6 weeks. Victor spread his hands to the room. Gentlemen, you see this. This is why he's still alive, and half the men we started with are in the ground. He reads the paper. He actually reads it. He reads it, Dominic said, and we die of old age at the table. Then have another drink, Dominic, Elena said. You're good at that one. The room laughed. Dominic's face went red and stayed red. Clara moved down the table with the bottle. glass by glass. She reached Adrian's right hand, and the folder lay open there, and her eyes crossed the page the way eyes do. Page 46. She read 4 lines before she could stop herself. She read them in the time it took to tip a bottle. In the event of the principal's death or incapacity, control of all holdings, interests, and instruments shall pass to the designated heirs of Adrian Cole or the trustee of record. Or, Clara Bennett kept pouring. Her hand did not shake. That was the strange part. Later she would think about that a great deal, about how her body kept doing its job while her mind fell down a flight of stairs. The wine went into the glass, the bottle came up, the cloth caught the drip. She stepped back exactly the way she had stepped back 10,000 times, and inside her skull a voice was screaming, and it said and. 3 weeks ago it said and. She could see it. She could see the exact page, the exact stack, the exact angle she had set it back at, squared to the edge of the walnut table at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday in October, and it had said, and the trustee of record acting together, and meant 2 signatures, and meant the heirs and the trustee had to agree on every move forever, which meant neither of them could steal anything, which meant the whole structure was a cage with 2 locks and 2 keys, or meant 1 key, or meant that on the day Adrian Cole died, or on the day someone decided Adrian Cole was incapacitated, the trustee of record could take everything without asking a single human being's permission. Clara's eyes went before she could stop them to the signature block at the bottom of the facing page. Trustee of record, Victor A. Hale. She had to leave the room. She turned. She walked. She got 4 steps. Sweetheart. Victor Hale's voice. Clara stopped. She turned back with her face arranged into the pleasant nothing she had worn for 5 years. Sir, you're spilling. She looked down. A drop of red had run down the neck of the bottle and left a small dark coin on the carpet. I'm sorry, sir. Don't apologize to me. I don't own the carpet. Laughter. Victor was smiling. He was smiling right at her, and his eyes were not smiling at all, and Clara understood with total clarity that he had watched her read the page. Long night. Yes, sir. Go get some air. Thank you, sir. She got to the hallway. She got exactly as far as the corner by the linen closet before her legs stopped working, and she had to put her hand flat on the wall. Think, she told herself. Think. You could be wrong. She wasn't wrong. She was never wrong. That was the whole problem with her life. You could be wrong about what it means. You're a maid. You clean floors. 14 people in that room went to law school, and you finished high school in a building with no air conditioning. Elena Rossi read it. Bruno's people read it. Victor read it 4 times. Victor wrote it. Clara pressed her forehead against the wall. Say something and what happens? Walk in there and open your mouth in front of 14 men who kill people and say what? Say, excuse me, Mr. Cole. 3 weeks ago I was cleaning your study and I read your private papers, which is the one thing I was told never to do, and I've memorized a legal clause, and I think your lawyer of 26 years, the man who carried your father's casket, is robbing you. They'd laugh, and then they'd stop laughing. And then Victor Hale would look at her with those unsmiling eyes and say something reasonable and warm, and Adrian would believe him, because of course he would, and by morning she'd be gone. Not fired, gone. And her mother would sit in a chair at a dialysis center at 10:15 on Thursday, and nobody would come to take her home. Nobody comes to take her home. That was the sentence that did it. That was the sentence that put Clara Bennett's back flat against the wall and stole all the air out of the hallway. She had a mother. She had $1,100 in a coffee can. She had a bus pass and a gift she'd never used, and a life that was very small and very quiet, and entirely, completely the only thing she had. And down the hall, a man she did not love, did not admire, and did not owe one single thing to, was 6 feet away from signing away 26 years of his life to the man who taught him how to sign. He isn't innocent, she told herself. Don't you dare tell yourself he's innocent. You know what he is. You've cleaned this house. You know exactly what he is. But she also knew what she'd seen on his face during the toast. She also knew that whatever Adrian Cole had done, and he had done plenty, nobody deserved to be handed a pen by a man who had held them as a baby and told to sign their own throat away. And she knew something else, something worse, something she had been refusing to look at directly for 5 straight years. She knew that every single time in her life she had seen something wrong and said nothing, she had told herself it was because speaking would cost too much. And it had always been true. And it had cost her everything anyway. Footsteps. Clara straightened up so fast her spine cracked. Victor Hale came around the corner alone, unhurried hands in his pockets, and he stopped 4 feet away from her and looked at her the way a man looks at weather. "What's your name?" "Clara, sir." "Clara what?" Her mouth went dry. "Bennett, sir." "Bennett." He nodded slowly. "Bennett. You know, in 26 years, I have learned exactly one useful thing about this business, and I'll give it to you for free, because I like your face." He took 1 step closer. There are 2 kinds of people in a room, people who matter and people who see. And the reason people who see never last is that they cannot help themselves. They see, and then they open their mouths, and then they stop being either kind of person at all. "I don't know what you mean, sir." "You read page 46. Silence. "I watched you read it," Victor said pleasantly. "You read 4 lines in about 1.5 seconds, which is a very unusual talent for a woman who mops floors, and then you turned white as that napkin and put your hand on the wall. So let's not do the part where you insult me." Clara said nothing. Her heart was hitting her ribs so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Here's what happens now," Victor said. "In about 9 minutes, a man is going to sign a piece of paper. That paper makes every man at that table richer than his father ever dreamed. It makes Elena Rossi legitimate. It puts 400 people on a legal payroll with health insurance. Miss Bennett actual health insurance, which is more than this house has ever done for you." He let that sit. "And you have a thought in your head. I can see it sitting there. And I want you to understand something with total clarity before you decide what to do with it." He reached out, took her wrist and squeezed it, not hard enough to bruise. Hard enough. "Your mother," Victor said, "is at St. Ambrose. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10:15. She's on the list for a kidney she's never going to get because there are 206 people ahead of her and every one of them has somebody. She has you." He smiled. "That's a very thin somebody, Clara." Clara heard her own voice come out of her mouth, small and strange. "How do you know that?" "Because I'm the attorney." He let go of her wrist and stepped back and buttoned his jacket. "I know everything about everyone in this house. That's not a threat. That's a resume." He turned to go, and then paused and looked back with something that was almost kind. "Go home, sweetheart. Take the night. You'll feel better in the morning. Everyone always does." And he walked back toward the dining room. Clara stood alone in the hallway, holding her own wrist. 9 minutes. She could hear them through the door. Glasses. A burst of laughter. Dominic's voice saying something about the veal. Elena's dry answer. The ordinary music of 14 people at a table who had no idea that the man pouring the wine had already decided who would own their lives. 9 minutes and she could walk out the servants' entrance and get the 10:40 bus and be home by midnight and lie in the dark next to a wall she had painted herself and wake up tomorrow with a job, with a mother, with a life. And in 6 months, or a year, or 5 years, Adrian Cole would die, the way men like that die, and Victor Hale would put one signature on one page and take everything, and nobody on this earth would ever know that a maid had seen it coming and had chosen the 10:40 bus. Nobody would know. She would know. She would know every single morning for the rest of her life, the way she knew the tilt of a guidance counselor's head from 13 years ago, because that was the gift, that was the terrible gift. She did not get to forget things. Other people got to forget. Clara Bennett got to carry. Her mother's voice from 100 mornings from 1,000. "You're going to be late, baby." "I'm never late, Mama. That's because you leave early." "That's not the same thing as not being late." Clara looked down. Her hands were shaking now. Now they decided to shake. She heard Victor Hale's voice come through the door, warm and easy and absolutely certain. "All right, page 62, Adrian, right at the bottom, right there." And she heard the sound. The small, dry, ordinary sound of a pen being picked up off a table. Clara Bennett put her hand on the door. She pushed it open. The sound the door made was nothing. A click. But 14 faces came up off that table like she'd fired a gun in a church. Adrian Cole's pen was already touching the paper. "Mr. Cole?" Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Rosa Delgado, standing by the sideboard with a tray of coffee cups, went so pale that Clara saw it from across the room. Dominic Cole laughed first. Of course he did. "Oh, that's fantastic. That's the help. That's the actual help. Mr. Cole, I need 1 minute." "Get her out," somebody said from the far end, one of the Detroit men. He said it the way you'd say, "Get that dog out of the kitchen." Marcus Byrne was already moving. He came off the wall fast for a man that size, and his hand closed around Clara's upper arm, and his voice was right at her ear, low and almost pleading. Bennett, walk. Walk with me right now." "I can't." "You can. Move your feet." "Marcus, I can't." Elena Rossi set her glass down. That was all she did. She set a glass down on a table, and the entire room got quieter, and she looked at Clara with an expression that was not kind, but was somehow worse than kind. It was curious. "Adrian," Elena said, "your girl's talking." Adrian Cole had not moved. The pen was still in his hand. He was looking at Clara the way a man looks at a word in a language he used to know. "Do I know you?" he said. And Clara Bennett, with 14 people staring at her and a 240-pound man holding her arm and her heart trying to climb out of her throat, heard herself say, "You asked me once why I cleaned your study at 2 a.m. Something changed in his face. Something small. "Wine?" he said. "Yes, sir." "It wouldn't come up with the machine." "No, sir. It had to come up by hand." Victor Hale said gently, "Adrian, we're 9 minutes from being done. Marcus, please." And Marcus's grip tightened, and Clara felt her feet start to slide, and she did the only thing she had left. She said, "Sir, there's a problem with your coffee." The room stopped. Dominic said, "The what?" "The coffee, sir." Clara's voice came out level. She had no idea how. "The service you asked for. The one from your mother's house. I set it out tonight, and there's a crack in the pot, and I didn't want to serve out of it in front of your guests without asking you first, because I know what it is." Adrian Cole stared at her. There was no coffee service from his mother's house. There never had been. But he had told her once 3 years ago, on the day his dog died, standing in a doorway at midnight, talking to nobody, that his mother had owned exactly one beautiful thing in her whole life, and it was a coffee pot, and that when she died, his father sold it for $400. He had said it to the room, not to her. She had been on her knees with a rag, and he had not known she was there. He remembered saying it. She watched him remember. 8:44. Adrian Cole set the pen down on the table. "Everybody eat," he said. "I'll be 5 minutes." Victor Hale's voice changed by about half a degree. "Adrian, 5 minutes, Victor. It's a crack in a pot. Then it'll take 4. Adrian stood, and he buttoned his jacket, and he walked toward the door, and he did not look at Clara as he passed her. Byrne let go of her arm. Marcus let go. Clara followed him out. The hallway was 40 feet long, and it took 900 years. He walked ahead of her, hands in his pockets, past the linen closet, past the corner where her legs had stopped working, and he opened the door to the small library and stood aside and let her walk in first, which no one in that house had ever done for her in 5 years. Then he shut the door and turned around, and every trace of the man from the dining room was gone. "There's no coffee pot." "No, sir. My mother's coffee pot was sold in 1994. "Yes, sir. So you either went through my mother's estate records, which are sealed, or you were in the room when I said it out loud, which was one time at midnight 3 years ago." His voice was not raised. It was worse than raised. "Which was it?" "I was cleaning behind the reading chair, sir. You didn't see me." "I didn't see you." "No, sir." "Nobody sees you." "No, sir." Adrian Cole looked at her for a long, long moment. "You've got 4 minutes, he said. "And I want you to understand something before you use them. If you're about to ask me for money, I will pay you and fire you, and you'll never work in this state again. If you're about to tell me somebody in this house touched you, I will handle it, and you'll be safe, and you'll never work in this state again either, because I can't have you here after. And if you're about to waste my time in front of the 14 most dangerous men in Chicago on the biggest night of my life, I don't think I can help you at all. So choose carefully." Clara's mouth was so dry, she had to swallow twice. 8:46. "Page 46, she said. "Nothing." "Page 46. she said again. Clause 9, subsection C. In the event of the principal's death or incapacity, control of all holdings, interests, and instruments shall pass to the designated heirs of Adrian Cole or the trustee of record. Silence. 3 weeks ago, Clara said. On a Tuesday at approximately 2 in the afternoon, I was wiping down the walnut table in your study. There was a stack of papers on it. I lifted the stack to wipe underneath it, and I saw the top page, and the top page was Clause 9, subsection C, and it said, and. Adrian Cole did not move. It said, shall pass to the designated heirs of Adrian Cole and the trustee of record acting together. Clara's voice cracked, and she hated it, and she kept going. And means 2 signatures, sir. And means nobody moves anything unless everybody agrees, or means 1. Or means whoever's left standing takes all of it and doesn't have to ask. She stopped. And the trustee of record is Victor Hale. The room was so quiet she could hear the clock in the hall. Adrian Cole said very quietly, say the clause again. In the event of the principal's death or incapacity, control of all holdings, interests, and instruments shall pass to the designated heirs of Adrian Cole or the trustee of record. Word for word. That is word for word, sir. From a page you looked at for how long? About a second. 3 weeks ago. Yes, sir. And you're telling me you remember a legal clause you read for 1 second 3 weeks ago well enough to tell me a 2-letter word changed? Yes, sir. Why would I believe that? And Clara Bennett, who had spent 5 years making herself smaller than the furniture, said, because on March 11th you told Mr. Byron to move the Kenwood account to the second bank, not the first. And Mr. Byron said the second bank charges more, and you said I don't care what it charges, the first one's got a son-in-law. Because on the 9th of last August, a man came here in a green coat, and you gave him an envelope in the foyer, and you said, this is the last one, Petey, and he cried. Because in January you told Miss Rosie that you don't drink at the table because your father drank at the table. Adrian Cole's face did not change, but something behind it did. And I never repeated one word of any of it, Clara said. Not once, not to anybody, for 5 years. Because Mrs. Whitaker told me on my first day that my silence was the only thing keeping me alive, and she was right, and I have been very, very good at it. 8:48. So then why are you standing here? And that was the question, wasn't it? That was the whole thing. Clara opened her mouth, and what came out was not what she planned. Because I watched your face during the toast. What? During Mr. Hale's toast, about the shoebox. Her hands were shaking. She let them. Everybody at that table was watching a boss. I was watching a man who looked like he was about to cry, and I've been in this house 5 years, and I've never seen you look like anything, and I thought he actually loves that old man. She swallowed. And then 20 minutes later, I read that page, and I understood that the old man has known for probably 2 years exactly what day he's going to take everything you have, and he's been calling you kid the entire time. Nothing. And I've got a mother on dialysis and $1,100 in a coffee can, Clara said. And Mr. Hale stopped me in the hallway 8 minutes ago and told me her hospital and her days and her times and the number of people ahead of her on the list, which is 206, and then he squeezed my wrist and told me to go home and take the night and I'd feel better in the morning. Adrian Cole's head came up about an inch. He what? He said it wasn't a threat. He said it was a resume. And for the first time in 5 years, Clara Bennett watched something come into Adrian Cole's eyes, and it was not anger. Anger would have been fine. Anger would have been a Tuesday. It was grief. It arrived and sat down and made itself at home in about a second and a half, and then it was gone, buried so fast and so completely that she almost believed she'd imagined it. He walked to the door. Sir, stay here. Sir, if you go back in there and open that folder in front of him, he'll know. Adrian stopped with his hand on the knob. He'll know, Clara said, and he'll be ready because he's been ready for 2 years. Sir, he wrote it. Nobody writes a thing like that in a night. He's had a version of that page in a drawer since before I started working here. Adrian Cole turned around slowly. You've been a maid for 5 years. Yes, sir. How do you know how to think like this? And Clara said, because when you're nobody, sir, thinking is the only thing that's free. 8:51. He looked at her for 4 full seconds. Then he said, burn. The door opened instantly, which meant Marcus had been standing on the other side of it the whole time, which meant he had heard every word, and Clara's stomach dropped through the floor. "Boss, where's my copy?" "Which copy?" "The working copy, the one I've been marking up for 6 weeks. Where is it?" Marcus's face did something Clara had never seen it do. It went blank in a way that was not calm. "Victor's people collected the working copies Tuesday," he said. "For version control, standard. They collected all 4. All 4. Yours, Elena's, Bruno's, and the office file." Silence. "So there is no copy in this house," Adrian said, "of what page 46 used to say." "Boss, answer the question, Marcus." "No," Marcus said. "There's no copy." And Clara watched 2 men understand the same thing at the same moment, and it was like watching a floor give way. "Tuesday," Adrian said. "He collected them Tuesday, 3 days ago." "Standard practice, boss. He's done it on every deal for 20... "Marcus." Adrian's voice was so soft. "Do you hear yourself defending him right now in this room?" Marcus Burns shut his mouth. 8:53. "Go back in," Adrian said. "Both of you. Byrne, you stand where you stood. Bennett, you pour." Clara stared at him. "Sir, you heard me. You want me to walk back in there and pour wine." "I want you to walk back in there and pour wine and let Victor Hale watch you do it," Adrian said, "so that in about 90 seconds he can decide he was wrong about you and go back to feeling like the smartest man in the building. Can you do that? Can you do that, Miss Bennett?" And Clara said, "My hands are shaking." "Then let them shake. He'll like that." Adrian buttoned his jacket. "He'll think it means he won." They walked back in at 8:54. The table had gone loud again the way tables do, and Dominic was telling a story with his hands, and the moment Adrian appeared, the room reorganized itself around him like it always did. "There he is," Victor Hale said warmly. "Crisis averted. Is the pot going to live?" "It's cracked." "Tragic." "It's just a pot." Adrian sat down. He reached for the pen. He picked it up. "Where were we? 62. 62, bottom right." Clara went to the sideboard, picked up the bottle, and started down the table. Her hands were shaking so badly the linen rattled against the glass. She felt Victor Hale watching her. She made herself not look, and then she heard him make a small sound, half a laugh, a little exhale through the nose, the sound a man makes when a thing he was mildly worried about turns out to be nothing at all. Clara poured and did not look up and hated him with a purity that surprised her. "All right," Adrian said. He put the pen to the paper, and then he stopped. "Actually, Victor, do me a favor." "Anything, kid. Read me page 46. The air went out of the room. Nobody understood why. That was the thing. Nobody at that table knew what page 46 said, so nobody knew why the temperature had just dropped 20 degrees. They only knew that Adrian Cole had said a number and that Victor Hale had not answered for 1 second too long. 1 second. Clara counted it. 46, Victor said. 46. Adrian, 46 is boilerplate. It's the succession language. It's the same language that's been in every document you've signed since 2009. Then it'll be quick. We've got 14 people here. We've got 14 people here who've got nowhere better to be. Read it. And Victor Hale smiled and turned pages, and Clara watched the most frightening thing she had ever seen in her life, which was a man deciding in real time, in front of a room, exactly how to lie. In the event of the principal's death or incapacity, Victor read, control of all holdings, interests, and instruments shall pass to the designated heirs of Adrian Cole and the trustee of Record Acting together. He looked up. Same as it's always been. Clara felt the floor tilt. He'd read it right. He'd read the and. He'd sat there and read words that were not on the page in front of him, and he'd done it so smoothly, so warmly, without a flicker, that Clara herself almost believed she'd made the whole thing up. Elena Rossi said, Are we seriously doing a reading, Adrian? It's boilerplate. I read it Thursday. It says and. You read it Thursday. I read all 62 pages Thursday. It says and. And there it was. Because Elena Rossi had read the version from Thursday, and the version on that table had been printed Friday. Clara's hands had stopped shaking. She noticed that distantly, like a fact about somebody else. Slide it here, Adrian said. Adrian, slide it here, Victor. Victor Hale did not move. 26 years and he did not move, and every man at that table saw it, and the room went so quiet that Clara could hear the ice settling in Dominic's glass. Then Victor laughed and slid the folder down the table, and the laugh was perfect, and it was the exact moment Clara understood that this man had never once in his life been caught at anything. Adrian turned to page 46. He read it. He read it for a very long time. Then he said, Elena, come look at this. Adrian, I'm not going to... Elena, please. And something in the please got her out of her chair. She came around the table and leaned over his shoulder and read, and Clara watched Elena Rossi's face and saw the exact instant it happened. A woman who had spent 30 years learning not to react reacting. She said one word. She said it very quietly. Or. 9:01. Dominic said, or what? Nobody answered him. Or what's or? Somebody tell me what's happening. Sit down, Dominic, Elena said. I am sitting down. Then sit down harder. Victor Hale leaned back in his chair and folded his hands across his stomach, and he looked, Clara thought, almost relaxed, almost relieved, like a man who'd been holding his breath at the bottom of a pool for 2 years and had finally come up. Well, he said. 26 years, Adrian said. Adrian, 26 years, Victor. You carried my father. I carried your father because your father was too cheap to hire pallbearers. Victor said it lightly, conversationally, and somehow that was worse than shouting. 6 of us, in the rain, and your father's estate paid me nothing because your father's estate was a shoebox and $11,000 in debt, and you know what I did, kid? I ate it. I ate the debt, and I ate the funeral, and I ate 6 years of your education, and I did it because I thought at the end of it there'd be a chair at the table. You have a chair at the table. I have a chair at your table. Victor, 26 years, and I have never once had a vote. Victor's voice was still perfectly pleasant. Not one. I built the thing. I wrote every structure, every shell, every trust, every piece of paper that has kept you and every man in this room out of a federal cell, and when it's done, when it's all done, and legal and clean and worth what it's worth, you know what I am. I'm counsel. I'm a line item. I'm the guy who gets a thank you at the toast. So you were going to wait for me to die. I wasn't going to wait for anything, Victor said. Incapacity, Adrian. Read the word. Death or incapacity. Death was never the plan. Death is slow. And the room came apart. Chairs went back. Somebody's glass hit the floor. 2 of the Detroit men were on their feet, and Marcus Byrne had crossed half the room, and Dominic was shouting something, and Elena Rossi was saying Adrian's name over and over in a voice Clara had never heard from her. And Adrian Cole did not move. He sat in his chair with his hands flat on the table, and he looked at Victor Hale, and he did not move a single muscle, and that stillness was the loudest thing in the room. Marcus, he said. Marcus stopped. Nobody touches him. Boss, nobody touches him. Adrian's voice never rose. He's got something. Look at him. Look at his face. He's sitting there with his hands folded in a room full of men who want him dead, and he's not sweating. 26 years. I've watched this man run a room, and he's not sweating. He turned back to Victor. What have you got? And Victor Hale smiled and said, You're smarter than they say, kid. 904. There are 11 envelopes, Victor said, with 11 different people, lawyers mostly. 2 aren't. If I don't make 11 phone calls between now and 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, all 11 of those envelopes go where they go. Some go to the bureau, 1 goes to a newspaper, 2 go to families. He let it sit. You know which families, Adrian? Nobody breathed. So here's the arrangement, Victor said. You sign. Everything I told you is still true. 400 people get health insurance. Everybody at this table gets richer than their fathers. Elena gets legitimate, and I get the trusteeship, which frankly I earned. And in 20 years, when I'm dead of being 70, it comes back to your kids anyway, if you ever bother to have any. He spread his hands. Nobody loses. Nobody dies. You just have to sit there and be a little less than you thought you were, which incidentally is what I've been doing since 1999. And Adrian Cole said no. Adrian, no. Think about it for 10 seconds. I've thought about it. Adrian stood up. Because here's the part you got wrong, Victor. You spent 26 years telling yourself the only thing I ever gave you was a thank you at a toast. And you're right. That's all I ever gave you. And I'm going to have to live with that for however long I've got left. He picked up the pen. He looked at it. He set it back down. But you spent 26 years in this house, and you never learned the one thing that actually matters. And what's that? That there's always somebody in the room you didn't count. And Adrian Cole looked at Clara Bennett. And so did every other person at that table. 9:06. Victor Hale turned his head slowly and looked at her, and the pleasantness fell off his face like a sheet off a statue. Her, he said. Her. The maid. Her name is Clara Bennett, Adrian said, and you told her that her mother's hospital was a resume, and that's the only reason you're going to lose. Victor Hale started laughing. It went on too long. It went on until it wasn't laughing. You're going to burn this down, he said, over a girl with a mop. No, Adrian said. I'm going to burn it down because you told me death was slow. He turned to the room. Everybody out. Everybody except Elena Marcus and Miss Bennett. Dominic, take our guests to the West Room and pour them something old and expensive and apologize on my behalf. Adrian, what the hell is Dominic now? They went. It took 90 seconds and nobody said a word, and the last man out shut the door, and then there were 5 people in a room and 62 pages on a table. Victor, Adrian said, you'll stay in the East guest room tonight. Marcus will be outside your door. You won't be touched, you won't be hurt, and you'll have your phone in the morning. Victor's eyes narrowed. That's it? That's it? You're not going to ask me who the 11 are? No? Why not? And Adrian said, because you'd tell me 11 names and 9 of them would be lies, and I'd spend the next 6 hours chasing ghosts instead of thinking. You taught me that, Victor. Page 1, year 1. Never let a man choose your questions. Something moved across Victor Hale's face then, and Clara would think about it for a long time afterward because it looked like pride. Marcus, Adrian said. Marcus took Victor's elbow. Victor stood unhurried and buttoned his jacket, and on his way past Clara he stopped. 10:15, he said quietly. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Marcus, Adrian said, and Marcus took him out. 9:11. Clara Bennett stood in a dining room with a bottle of wine in her hand and 2 of the most powerful people in Chicago, and she suddenly could not remember how to stand. Elena Rossi said, sit down before you fall down. I'm not allowed to sit in this room. Honey, in the last 20 minutes you've rewritten who's allowed to do what in this entire house. Sit down. Clara sat. Elena poured wine into a clean glass and pushed it across the table, and Clara looked at it and did not touch it. You don't drink. I'm working. Elena Rossi laughed out loud once and shook her head. Adrian, she's still working. I noticed. 5 minutes ago, she destroyed a $50 million deal in front of the Detroit table, and she's worried about the wine service. Elena leaned back. Where'd you find her? I didn't, Adrian said. That's the point. 9:13. He sat down across from Clara. He did not look like a boss anymore. He looked like a man who had been hit in the chest by a car and was politely waiting to find out how bad it was. Miss Bennett. Sir, I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to understand that I'm not accusing you. Do you understand the difference? No, sir, not really. That's fair. He almost smiled. First question, how many people knew you read that page in my study 3 weeks ago? Nobody. You didn't mention it to anyone, not another maid, not your mother. Sir, I've never told my mother where I work. Adrian's head came up. What? She thinks I clean at a hotel downtown, Clara said. 5 years. She thinks I clean at a hotel. Elena set her glass down. Why? Adrian said. Because she reads the papers, Clara said, and she knows your name, and if she knew where I went every morning, she'd have a stroke on the kitchen floor, and I'd have nobody left. Nobody said anything for a moment. Second question, Adrian said, and his voice had gone strange. Victor knew her hospital, her days, her times, her position on the transplant list. How, he said he's the attorney. That's not an answer, that's a brand. Adrian looked at Elena. 206 people ahead of her on a list. That's not public. That's not even close to public. That's a UNOS number, Elena, that's inside a hospital system. So he's got somebody at St. Ambrose, Elena said. He's got somebody at St. Ambrose. Adrian's jaw moved, which means he wasn't looking her up tonight. You don't get a UNOS number in 20 minutes. He pulled that file days ago. Clara felt her skin go cold. Days ago, she said. Days ago. Why would he pull a file on a Maid days ago? And Adrian Cole looked at her, and something terrible dawned in his face. He wouldn't, he said, unless somebody told him to, 917. Somebody in this house, Elena said slowly, told Victor Hale before tonight that the Maid was a problem. Nobody knew, Clara said. Nobody knew. I never told anybody. I never... And then she stopped, because that wasn't true. Rosa Delgado that morning in the servants' corridor, grabbing her elbow. You're not curious. And Clara had said no. And Rosa had said, you know what your problem is. You act like you're nobody. But you're not nobody. You're the only one here who notices when anything's wrong. Clara's stomach turned over. What? Adrian said. What just happened on your face? Nothing. Miss Bennett. It's nothing. It's a girl. She's 23. Say the name. And Clara said Rosa Delgado, and hated herself so much she had to look at the table. Elena was already up. I'll get her. Elena, wait. Clara stood too fast, and her chair went over backward, and the crash was enormous in that room. Wait, please. She's a kid. She talks. That's all she does. She talks to everybody. She doesn't mean anything by it. Which is exactly how it works, Elena said, not unkindly, and went out. Clara turned to Adrian. Sir, if she gets hurt because of me? Nobody's getting hurt. You don't know that. I do, actually, Adrian said, because I'm the one who decides. And Clara looked at him and said before she could stop herself, That's not comforting, sir. That's the opposite of comforting. And Adrian Cole, for the first time in 5 years, laughed. It was short and rough, and it clearly surprised him more than it surprised her. No, he said. I suppose it isn't. 9:22. Elena brought Rosa in, and Rosa was crying before she got through the door, which told Clara everything. Sit down, Rosa, Adrian said gently. Mr. Cole, I swear to God. Rosa, sit down. Nobody in this room is going to touch you. Sit. She sat. She was shaking so hard the chair moved. When did you talk to Mr. Hale? I didn't... Rosa! Adrian leaned forward, elbows on the table, and his voice was so kind that Clara wanted to scream. I want you to imagine the next 3 minutes going 2 different ways. In one of them, you tell me something true, and tomorrow you get up and go to work. In the other one, you tell me something clever. He waited. You're 23. You're not clever yet. That takes about 40 years and it costs everything. So let's do the first one. Rosa Delgado put her hands over her face. Tuesday, she said. 9:24. Tuesday, Adrian repeated. He came into the kitchen. He never comes in the kitchen. He was so nice. Rosa's voice went up and cracked. He asked how long I'd been here and if the girls got along and if anybody made me uncomfortable, and I said no. And he said, what about the quiet one? And I said, who? And he said, the one who's been here 5 years, the one who never talks. And I said, oh, Clara, she's fine. She's just serious. Clara couldn't breathe. And he said, is she smart? And I said... Rosa's face crumpled. I said, she's the smartest person in this house. Silence. I was defending you, Rosa said. Clara, I swear on my mother, I was defending you. He was talking about you like you were nothing, and I was so mad, and I said she's smarter than all of them. She remembers everything. She can tell you what somebody said 2 years ago, word for word, and he just stood there and smiled and said, isn't that something? Clara sat down very slowly. And then what? Adrian said. And then he said thank you and left. What else? Nothing. Rosa, what else? Rosa looked up and her mascara was down her face, and she said, he asked what her mother's name was. 9:26. Clara heard the sound of her own blood. And you told him, Elena said. I told him Ruth. I didn't. It's a name. It's just a name. It's a name I didn't know. Get her out of here, Clara said. Everyone looked at her. Get her out of here, please. Clara said, because she's 23 and she's about to figure out what she did, and she shouldn't have to figure it out in front of us. Elena Rossi looked at Clara Bennett for a long moment. Then she stood and put a hand on Rosa's shoulder and walked her out, and the door clicked shut. And Clara put her head in her hands. "Miss Bennett?" he asked on Tuesday. "Yes." He collected the working copies on Tuesday. Adrian went very still. "Say that again," he said. "He asked Rosa about me on Tuesday," Clara said into her hands. "And Marcus said Victor's people collected the 4 working copies on Tuesday, the same day. Sir, he didn't change that page tonight. He didn't change it Friday. He changed it Tuesday. And the reason he changed it Tuesday is that on Tuesday, he found out there was somebody in this house who reads things and doesn't forget them." She lifted her head. "He wasn't threatening me in that hallway because I saw page 46, she said. "He was threatening me because I was the only reason page 46 was ever going to be a problem. He knew about me 3 days before I knew about him." Adrian Cole stood up and walked to the far wall and stood there with his back to her. "No," he said. "Sir, no, that's still not right." His voice was flat. "Because if he found out about you on Tuesday and panicked, he'd have fired you on Tuesday. He's the attorney. He could have had you gone by Tuesday afternoon, and I'd never have noticed I didn't even know your name." Clara opened her mouth, closed it. "He didn't fire you," Adrian said. "He kept you here. He kept you in the house on the night in the room pouring the wine at the table. 9:31. "Why?" Clara whispered. Adrian turned around and his face was gray. "Because he wanted me to catch it," he said. "That's insane." "Is it?" Adrian's voice was rising, and it was the first time she'd ever heard it, and it was awful. "He read that clause out loud to me tonight, Clara. He read and off a page that says, or, 'He's the best liar I have ever met in my life,' and he chose in front of 14 witnesses to tell a lie that could be disproved by anybody at that table opening a folder. Why would he do that? He panicked. Victor Hale has never panicked. Not once, not in 26 years, not when they indicted us in 2008, not when my father died. He did not panic tonight." Adrian came back to the table. "He wanted me to open that folder. He wanted this room. He wanted me to throw everybody out and sit here at 9:30 at night with a maid and Elena Rossi trying to figure out who's loyal." Clara's mouth was dry. "Why?" "Because for the next 12 hours, Adrian said, I'm not going to be running an organization. I'm going to be looking under my own bed. He didn't lose tonight, Clara. He bought a day." And right then, Marcus Byrne came through the door without knocking. Adrian didn't turn. "How is he?" "Boss? How is he, Marcus?" "He's sitting on the bed in the east room with his hands on his knees," Marcus said, "and he asked me to tell you something." "Then tell me." Marcus swallowed. 240 pounds of man, and he swallowed. "He said to tell you that he's not the 11 envelopes," Marcus said. "He said to tell you that he's number 9. 9:34. Elena Rossi came back in on the last word and stopped in the doorway. "What did he say?" "He said he's number 9, Marcus said. "He said you'd understand, and if you didn't, to ask Elena." And every single person in that room turned to look at Elena Rossi. And Clara Bennett, sitting at a table she was not allowed to sit at, watched Elena's face and saw something she had seen exactly once before that night. She saw a person who had already known. "Elena," Adrian said. "Nothing." "Elena." "Adrian." Elena Rossi's voice was perfectly steady. "Sit down." "Don't tell me to sit down. Don't you ever tell me to sit down. What is number 9? And Elena said, "It's not 11 envelopes with 11 lawyers. It's never been envelopes. It's 11 people. 11 people who each hold one piece, and none of them know what the other 10 are holding. And if any one of them stops hearing from Victor, they open their piece and they act on it, and the pieces only make sense together." She looked at him. "It's a structure. He built it. He built it the same year he built everything else, and the whole point of it was that if anyone ever came for you, they'd have to come for 11 people at once, and nobody can do that." "That's a defense," Adrian said slowly. "It was a defense. He built me a defense. He built you a defense in 2009, and he never told you," Elena said, "because you'd have said no. He told me because somebody had to know. And every year for 17 years, I watched him keep it alive. And every year I thought that's the most loyal man I've ever met. And tonight, I found out that 17 years ago, he built the gun and then just quietly waited to see which direction he'd want to point it. 9:37. Adrian Cole put both hands on the back of a chair and leaned on it. You knew, he said, about the structure, not about the page. You knew for 17 years and you didn't tell me. Yes, Elena. And I'd do it again, she said. Because in 2009 you were 31 and you were angry and you'd have burned it down to prove you didn't need protecting. And you'd be dead now, Adrian. You would be dead now, and I would rather be a liar than a mourner. And nobody said anything for a long time. Clara sat very still and thought, this is what it looks like. This is what a house looks like when it's been standing on nothing for 17 years and someone finally checks. Number 9, Adrian said finally. He said he's number 9. What's 9? Elena didn't answer. Elena, what's number 9? And Elena Rossi said, I don't know. You just told me you knew. I know the structure exists. I know it's 11. I know they're compartmented. Her voice finally moved. Finally, for the first time, it moved. Adrian, I don't know what any of them are. That's the entire design. He said he's number 9 because he wants you to know that one of the 11 pieces is him. And I've spent 17 years assuming the 11 pieces were insurance against your enemies. And now I'm sitting in a room at 9:40 at night, Elena said, realizing I never once asked him what the other 10 were. 9:40. And that was when Clara Bennett heard her own voice say quietly, Sir. Nobody heard her. Sir. Adrian turned. He didn't say it to you, Clara said. What? He didn't say it to you. He said it to Mr. Byrne. She was looking at the table. She was thinking so hard her ears were ringing. He sat on a bed with a man outside his door, and he said, Tell Adrian, I'm number 9. Tell him to ask Elena. He knew that message would get to you through Mr. Byrne. He chose that. So, sir, why would a man who's been compartmenting information for 17 years hand you a piece of it for free? Silence. He wouldn't, Clara said, unless it isn't information, unless it's a question. Adrian said very carefully, What kind of question? And Clara Bennett looked up. The kind you ask when you want to find out who in the room already knew the answer, she said. Sir, he just made every person in this house watch Miss Rossi's face. Elena Rossi went white, and Marcus Byrne, standing by the door, said, Boss. Not now, Marcus. Boss. Marcus's voice had gone very strange. He asked me something else. Adrian turned. He asked me what time the maid's mother's dialysis was, Marcus said, and I said I didn't know. Clara stood up. And he said, he said, that's a shame, Marcus, because somebody in this house does. 9:42. Clara Bennett was already moving toward the door. Bennett? I have to go. Bennett, stop. Mr. Cole, she's alone. Clara's voice came apart in the middle of it. She's alone in that apartment. She's been alone since 6 o'clock this morning. She doesn't lock the back window because the frame's warped, and I keep saying I'll fix it, and I never fix it. Marcus. Boss. 2 cars now. You drive 1. Boss, I'm not leaving you in this house tonight. Marcus. Adrian's voice didn't rise. It just landed. 2 cars. You drive 1. Marcus Byrne looked at his boss for 1 second, and then he was gone, and Clara heard him shouting names in the hallway, and the whole house came awake at once. She turned back. Sir, I need to be in that car. No. That's my mother. And you're the only person in this building who knows what was on page 46 3 weeks ago, Adrian said. If you get in a car tonight and that car gets stopped at a light, everything I have goes with you. You stay here. Then send me home and let me keep my mother and forget I ever opened my mouth. Too late for that. For you. For both of us, Adrian said. That's what tonight was. That's what it's always been. You knew it when you put your hand on that door. And Clara Bennett stood in the middle of a dining room with 14 unfinished dinners going cold and understood that he was right and that she hated him for saying it out loud. 9:45. Elena Rossi hadn't moved from her chair. Adrian, what's the address? Clara said, I'm not giving you my mother's address. Sweetheart, don't. Clara's head came up. Don't call me sweetheart. He called me sweetheart, twice. Elena Rossi stopped and something in her face rearranged itself, and she said very carefully, Miss Bennett, if Marcus doesn't have an address, he drives around the South Side for 4 hours. And if I give you the address, then everybody in this room has it, including whoever gave it to Victor Hale. The silence went on a long time. She's right, Adrian said. Adrian, she's right, Elena. He turned to Clara. Marcus, only Marcus. You tell him at the car, you tell him alone, and nobody else in this house hears it, including me. Does that work? Clara looked at him. Why would you do that, she said. Because I'm not sure yet either, Adrian said. 9:48. She told Marcus Byrne in the drive with the engine already running, standing on the wrong side of a car door, and he wrote nothing down. Say it twice, he said. She said it twice. Apartment. 3C. The buzzer doesn't work. Knock 4 times, then 2. She won't open for anything else. 4, then 2. Marcus! Clara grabbed his sleeve, and she had never in 5 years touched anybody in that house. She thinks I clean at the Drexel Hotel. She's going to ask you why a man from a hotel is at her door at 11 o'clock at night. Marcus Byrne looked down at her hand on his sleeve. What do you want me to tell her? And Clara Bennett heard the answer come out of her own mouth and didn't recognize her own voice. Tell her the truth, she said. Tell her I lied to her for 5 years. 9:51. She came back inside, and Adrian Cole was standing exactly where she'd left him, and Elena Rossi was on the phone in the corner speaking Italian, very fast and very quietly, and the house had that terrible feeling of a body with the heart stopped and the fingers still twitching. Sir? Mrs. Whitaker, Adrian said. Clara's stomach turned over. No. Miss Bennett. No, sir. You said it yourself. Somebody in this house knows what time your mother's dialysis is. Adrian's voice was flat and exhausted. Who does the schedule... Clara didn't answer. Who does the schedule, Clara? She's been here 31 years. So had he. And that shut her up, and Clara hated it, and she stood there hating it, while Adrian Cole picked up the house phone and said 4 words into it and hung up. 9:54. Mrs. Whitaker came in with her hands folded in front of her and her back straight, and she was 68 years old, and she looked exactly the way she had looked on the morning she told Clara that silence was the only thing keeping her alive. Mr. Cole. Sit down, Mrs. Whitaker. I'd prefer to stand, sir. I'd prefer you sat. Then I'll sit. She sat. She looked at Clara for exactly 1 second, and there was nothing in it at all. I understand there's been an incident. Do you? Adrian said. The Detroit gentlemen are drinking your father's scotch in the West Room, and Mr. Hale is upstairs with a man outside the door. I've run this house for 31 years, sir. I can read a room. Then read this one. I'd rather you told me. Adrian sat down across from her. 2 questions. First one. Do you know where Miss Bennett's mother receives medical treatment? And Mrs. Whitaker said without a flicker, St. Ambrose, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10:15 in the morning. Clara's knees went. 9:56. How? Adrian said. Because she asked me for it. Mrs. Whitaker's voice didn't move. 3 years ago, she came to me and she asked to work Sundays instead of Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she wouldn't say why, and I told her no, and she said fine, and she took the Tuesdays and the Thursdays, and she never asked again. So I looked. You looked. I run a house of 19 staff in a building where men are sometimes shot, Mr. Cole. Yes, I looked. I look at all of them. It's in a file in my office in a locked drawer, and I have the only key, and if you'd like to fire me for it, I understand completely, and I'd do it again tomorrow. Who else has seen that file? Nobody. Mrs. Whitaker. Nobody, sir. And Adrian said quietly, Victor Hale told Miss Bennett tonight that her mother is number 206 on a transplant list. Mrs. Whitaker's face changed. It was the first time in 5 years Clara had ever seen it happen, and it was like watching a wall crack. That's not in my file, she said. I know. That's not in my file, Mr. Cole. My file says Ruth Bennett St. Ambrose Tuesdays and Thursdays. It does not say anything about a list. I didn't know there was a list. her hands folded on the table, had gone white at the knuckles. I didn't know she was that sick. And she turned and looked at Clara, and Clara looked at the floor. 9:58. Second question, Adrian said. Ask it. Did you ever give Victor Hale anything about my staff? Every year. The room stopped. Every year. Mrs. Whitaker said, since 1999, Mr. Hale's office has requested the household employment records for legal review. Names, dates of hire addresses, references, immigration status where relevant. It's a liability requirement. He explained it to me himself. It's why nobody's ever been able to sue this house. Adrian didn't say anything. He has all of it, Mrs. Whitaker said slowly, and her voice was starting to come apart at the edges. Sir, he has all of it. Every person in this house. 27 years of it. Where they live, who they live with, what they're afraid of. She looked up. I gave it to him. Once a year, in a folder. I walked it to his car. Elena Rossi hung up the phone. Adrian, she said, I heard. Then you understand what 19 staff means. It means 19 families. It means the cook's brother in Tampa, and the driver's daughter at DePaul, and Rosa Delgado's entire village in Michoacan. I said I heard Elena. 10:01. Mrs. Whitaker stood up. Sit down, Adrian said. No, sir. She was shaking. 68 years old and shaking, and Clara had genuinely believed the woman was made out of dry stone. No, sir. I want to say one thing and then I'll sit down and you can do whatever you like with me. Then say it. I have kept this house for 31 years, Mrs. Whitaker said. I kept it for your father, who was a pig, and I kept it for you, who is not. And in 31 years, I have told exactly one lie to a member of this family, and it was to your mother about a woman in 1989, and she deserved not to know. Her chin came up. I gave that man those folders because he asked in a voice that made it sound like paperwork. That's all. That's the whole crime. He asked in a voice that made it sound like paperwork, and I handed him 19 lives once a year for 27 years and said, thank you, Mr. Hale, and went back to counting the linen. And then she sat down and put her hand over her mouth, and Clara Bennett, who had every reason on this earth to say nothing, said, it's not your fault. Mrs. Whitaker didn't look up. Ma'am, it's not your fault. He does that. Clara's voice was low. He tells you the terrible thing in a normal voice, and by the time you've understood it, you've already agreed to it. He did it to me in a hallway 2 hours ago. I've got a mind like a tape recorder, and I still stood there and said, yes, sir. Mrs. Whitaker made a sound. Look at me, Clara said. Ma'am, look at me. You told me on my first day that silence was the only thing keeping me alive. I remember. You were wrong, Clara said. But you were trying to save my life, and you were the only person in this building who ever tried. 10:04. Adrian Cole stood up and walked to the window and stood there with his back to all of them for a long time. Elena, he said. Yes. 19 staff. I want every one of them in the ballroom in 20 minutes. Wake them up. Bring the night people back. I don't care what it costs. And tell them the truth. Adrian. Elena, in about 6 hours, a man upstairs is going to make 11 phone calls, or not make 11 phone calls, and either way, somebody in this house is going to get a call from a stranger tomorrow offering them money to say a thing about me. He turned around. I would rather they hear it from me at 10 at night than hear it from him at 9 tomorrow. That's not how this works. That's how it works now. 10:07. Clara said, Sir, can I say something? Say it. Don't do it in the ballroom. Why? Because nobody in this house, I would rather they hear it from me at 10 at night than hear it from him at 9 tomorrow. That's not how this works. That's how it works now. 10:07. Clara said, Sir, can I say something? Say it. Don't do it in the ballroom. Why? Because nobody in this house has ever been in the ballroom. Clara's hands were flat on the table. Sir, 19 people. They've cleaned that room. They've never stood in it. You put them in the ballroom at 10 at night, and they'll be so terrified they won't hear a word you say. Do it in the kitchen. Elena Rossi laughed out loud once and stopped. The kitchen, Adrian said. The kitchen, where they eat, where they're allowed to sit. Clara looked up at him. You want them to believe you? Then talk to them somewhere they're not scared of the furniture. Adrian Cole looked at her for a very long moment. Elena, he said. Kitchen. 10:20. 19 people in a kitchen at 10:20 at night, most of them in coats over pajamas. One man with a hairnet still on, all of them standing along the walls because not one of them would sit. Adrian Cole stood in the middle and told them. All of it. The page, the word, the folders, the 27 years of once a year in a car. Nobody said anything. Then the cook, a 60-year-old man named Aldo, who had worked there since before Adrian was in charge, said, My brother. Yes. My brother in Tampa. He has a restaurant. He has nothing to do with any of this. I know. He has nothing to do with any of this, Mr. Cole. He makes sandwiches. I know Aldo. And Aldo said, Then why is his address in a folder in that man's car? And his voice broke on the word car, and something in that kitchen came apart. They all started at once, 20 voices. My daughter, my papers, my sister, my son's school. Somebody was crying. Somebody was shouting. Mrs. Whitaker stood by the sink with her hands at her sides and took every word of it, and Clara watched a 68-year-old woman stand in a kitchen and be executed by people she'd worked beside for a decade, and Adrian Cole let it run. He didn't stop it. He stood in the middle and let 19 people scream at him, and Clara understood watching him that it was the first honest thing she had ever seen happen in that house. 10:26. Then a voice cut through it. Everybody shut up! It was Rosa Delgado. Her face was still swollen from crying, and her mascara was still down it, and she was 23 years old, and she was standing on a chair. Everybody shut up, Rosa said. You want to yell at somebody, yell at me. He asked me about Clara on Tuesday, and I told him everything he wanted to know in about 40 seconds, and I thought I was being nice. The kitchen went silent. That's what he does, Rosa said. He asks nice. So if you're all standing here thinking, well, I would never, I'm telling you right now, yes, you would. I did. And I'm the youngest person in this room, and I'm the only one who's admitted it out loud. Nobody moved. And then Aldo the cook said quietly, he asked me about my brother's restaurant 2 years ago. He said he wanted to eat there. And a driver in the back said, he asked me about my daughter's tuition. And a girl by the door said, he gave me $400 at Christmas. 10:29. Adrian Cole said, every one of you is on the payroll until this is over, whether you come to work or not. Anybody who wants to leave tonight, Elena will hand you an envelope at the door, and there's no hard feelings and no follow-up. And I mean that in a way I have never met anything in my life. Anybody who stays, stays, knowing exactly what I just told you. Nobody moved. I'm serious, Adrian said. The door's open. Aldo, take your brother off the board. Go. And Aldo the cook said, who's going to cook? And that was it. That was the whole thing. 19 people, and not one of them went out the door, and Clara Bennett stood in the corner of a kitchen and cried for the first time in 11 years, and was so ashamed of it that she turned around and faced the pantry. 10:34. Marcus Byrne called it 10:34. Adrian put it on speaker on the counter, and 19 people leaned in. Boss. Go. I got her. Clara made a noise. She's in the car. She's fine. She's yelling at me. A pause. She's yelling at me a lot, boss. Marcus, Clara said. Let me, Maid Bennett. Listen to me first. Marcus's voice changed. There was a man in the stairwell. The kitchen went dead. He wasn't doing anything, Marcus said. That's the thing. He was just sitting on the stairs between 2 and 3 with his phone. Didn't run, didn't reach, looked right at me. And when I came back down with your mother, he said evening and stood up and walked out the front door like a guy going to work. Who was he? Adrian said. I don't know. Marcus. Boss, I've been doing this for 19 years, and I don't know, Marcus said. And that's what I'm telling you. He wasn't muscle. He wasn't a shooter. He was a guy in a windbreaker sitting on a stair, and he wanted me to see him, and he said evening. 10:36. Adrian's hand had gone flat on the counter. He wanted you to see him. Yeah. Was he there before you got there, or did he come after? That's the part I don't like, Marcus said. The neighbor lady across the hall says he's been on that stair since about 6. Clara said 6. 6 o'clock, tonight, 4 hours before anything happened. Bennett, he was in your building 4 hours before you opened that door. And Clara Bennett heard herself say, "That's not possible," and heard how stupid it sounded and stopped. "It's possible," Adrian said quietly. "It's possible if he never thought you were going to stay quiet." 10:38. "Put her on," Clara said. "Bennett, Marcus, put my mother on the phone." There was a rustle, and then a voice Clara had heard every single morning of her life said, "Clara Louise Bennett." The whole kitchen was listening. Clara didn't care. "Mama! There is a man the size of a refrigerator in my kitchen, and another one in my hallway, and this one here says he works for a man named Cole." A pause. Clara could hear her mother breathing that particular thin breathing. "Baby, tell me he's lying." "He's not lying." Silence. 5 years. 5 years, Mama. The Drexel Hotel. There's no Drexel Hotel. Her mother made a sound like she'd been hit. "I'm sorry," Clara said. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've been sorry every single morning for 5 years, and I did it anyway because they pay in cash and they pay double. And there's no hotel in this city that was going to pay for your Thursdays. And I decided that you being alive and lied to was better than you being dead and told the truth. And I'd do it again, Mama. I'd do it again tomorrow." Nobody in that kitchen moved. And Ruth Bennett said, "Do you know what I've prayed for every night for 5 years? Mama, I prayed that you'd stop lying to me about that hotel," her mother said. 5 years, baby. I've known for 4.5. Clara's hand went over her mouth. 10:41. "You knew. You came home in December with frost on a coat that cost more than my car," Ruth Bennett said. "The Drexel Hotel doesn't have a driveway that long. I'm sick, Clara. I'm not stupid." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you'd have quit." Her mother's voice cracked finally, and it was the worst thing Clara had ever heard. "You'd have quit, and then you'd have had nothing, and I'd have watched you have nothing. And I couldn't do it, so I let my baby lie to my face every morning for 4.5 years, and I drank the tea, and I said, 'You're going to be late.'" A breath. "So don't you dare apologize to me. Don't you dare. We're the same, you and me. We both kept our mouths shut to keep the other one alive." Clara sat down on the floor of the kitchen with her back against a cabinet and cried in front of 19 people. 10:44. Adrian Cole picked up the phone and took it off speaker and walked into the pantry with it, and Clara heard him say, "Mrs. Bennett, this is Adrian Cole," and then the door shut. He was in there for 6 minutes. When he came out, he handed the phone to Elena and said, "She'll be here in 40 minutes. Put her in the blue room on 2 and get Dr. Ferris out of bed." "Adrian, we don't have a machine in this house." "Then get a machine in this house. By Thursday. By Thursday." Elena Rossi stared at him. "You want me to install a dialysis station in the Blackwood estate by Thursday morning?" "Yes." "Why?" And Adrian Cole said, "Because on Thursday morning at 10:15, every enemy I have in this city is going to know exactly where Ruth Bennett is going to be sitting for 4 hours, and I'm not sending that woman to St. Ambrose to find out who shows up." 10:52. Elena took Mrs. Whitaker and went to make phone calls, and the kitchen emptied out, and Clara Bennett was still sitting on the floor. Adrian sat down on the floor across from her, against the opposite cabinet, in a $5,000 suit, and it was the single strangest thing she had ever seen. "Sir, you can't sit on the floor." "Why not?" "Because you're you." "Miss Bennett," Adrian said. "As of about 2 hours ago, I have no idea who I am, so I'm going to sit on the floor." And Clara laughed. It came out wet and ugly, and she couldn't stop it, and then he laughed, and for about 4 seconds, 2 people sat on a kitchen floor at 11 o'clock at night and laughed like the world wasn't ending. Then he said, "I need to ask you for something, and you're going to say no." "Then don't ask." "I have to." "Sir, I've had the worst night of my life." "I know," Adrian said. "That's why you're the only person in this house I can ask." 10:55. 11 people, he said, compartmented. Nobody knows what anybody else holds. Elena's known the structure existed for 17 years and doesn't know a single name. Victor built it in 2009 and never wrote it down because Victor doesn't write things down. That's the entire point of Victor. So there's no file, Clara. There's no drawer. There's no safe. 11 pieces of my life are sitting in 11 heads, and the only man who knows all 11 is upstairs on a bed with his hands on his knees waiting for me to come beg. Adrian looked at her. Unless. And Clara Bennett understood, and her whole body went cold. No. Clara. No. No. Sir, no. 5 years. Sir. 5 years in this house, Adrian said. 5 years standing against walls while men said things out loud because you weren't a person. 5 years of numbers and names and dates going into your head and never once coming out. Victor Hale spent 17 years building a machine that only works because no one human being can hold all 11 pieces at the same time. Sir, don't say it. And the entire time, Adrian said, there was a woman with a rag standing 4 feet away. 11:01. Clara Bennett got up off the floor. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. You're asking me to open it. Her voice was shaking, and she couldn't make it stop. Sir, 5 years. Do you understand what's in there? I remember the sound a man made in your foyer in August. I remember Rosa's shoe size because she said it once. I remember every single thing that has ever happened to me since I was 4 years old, and I have never been able to put one thing down, not one, not ever. And the only way I have survived it is by never ever going in there on purpose. Adrian didn't move. You think it's a gift, Clara said. Everybody thinks it's a gift. It's a room, sir. It's a room with no door, and everything that ever hurt me is still in there happening right now at full volume, and you're asking me to walk in and go looking. Silence. Yes, Adrian said. I am. And Clara Bennett said, why should I? And Adrian Cole said, because there's a man in a windbreaker who's been sitting on your mother's stairs since 6 o'clock. 11:04. She stood there for 11 seconds. She counted them. Because that's what she did. Then she said, I need a room with no windows and no clock and nobody talking. I need water. I need somebody to write because if I write, I'll go slower than I think and I'll lose it. And I need you to understand that I'm not going to give you 11 names. Why not? Because I don't have 11 names, sir. Nobody said 11 names in front of me. I have 5 years of noise. Clara's jaw set. But I've got a lot of noise. 11:12. They put her in the small library. Elena Rossi sat across from her with a legal pad, and Adrian stood by the door, and Mrs. Whitaker brought water and did not leave. Start anywhere, Elena said. That's not how it works. Then how does it work? Give me a date, Clara said. Any date. I need a hook, or I'm just standing in the room. Elena looked at Adrian. Adrian said, 2009. That's a year, not a date. March 2009. And Clara Bennett closed her eyes and said, I wasn't here in 2009. 11:14. Elena set the pen down. Then this is a waste of... But he was, Clara said, eyes still shut. And men who build a thing can't stop talking about it. Not the thing. Around the thing. Her voice had gone flat and strange, like someone reading. Sir, in this house in 5 years, how many times did Victor Hale say the word 9? How would I know how many, Clara said. And the room went quiet. 9 is a normal number, Clara said. People say it. 9 o'clock, 9 million, page 9. 411 times in 5 years. That's a normal number in a normal house. Her eyes stayed shut. But he said it wrong 6 times. 11:16. Wrong how? Adrian said. He said it, and then he stopped. Clara's hands were flat on the table. 6 times in 5 years, Victor Hale said the number 9 in this house, and then took a breath he didn't need. Sir, he never takes a breath he doesn't need. It's the only tell that man has, and I've been watching it for 5 years without knowing it was a tell. Elena picked the pen back up. Give me the 6, she said. August 9th, 2021, in the foyer on the phone. He said, tell 9 I'm not doing that, and then he stopped. Clara's voice never changed. November 3rd, 2022, in the study, with the door open to nobody. He said 9 is going to be a problem, and that's my fault. April, no. March 22nd, 2023, in the hall. He was on the phone with a woman. I know it was a woman because he changed his voice. And he said 9, and then he said no. I said 9, and then he stopped, and then he laughed. Clara, Elena said. June 9th, 2024, in the drive, and this one's different because he wasn't on the phone. He was talking to a man in a gray car, and he said if it ever gets to 9, it means I lost. Nobody breathed. 2 more, Adrian said. 11:19. February 11th this year in the kitchen. Clara opened her eyes. In the kitchen, sir. Victor Hale was in the kitchen in February, and I forgot about it until right now, because it didn't mean anything, and I want you to understand that's what this is. It's not remembering. It's the fact that nothing ever gets thrown away. What did he say? He was on the phone by the pantry, and he said, I'm not asking 9, I'm telling 9. And Mrs. Whitaker was 6 feet away counting the linen. Mrs. Whitaker's hand went to her chest. I heard him say that, she whispered. I heard him say that, and I thought he was talking about a table. And the 6th, Adrian said. Clara looked at him. Tonight, she said. In the east guest room, through a closed door with a man standing outside it. He said, tell Adrian I'm number 9, 11:21. He said, tell him to ask Elena, Adrian said slowly. Yes. Why Elena? He knows Elena doesn't have the names. Yes. So why? And Clara Bennett said, because he wanted somebody in this house to hear Miss Rossi say the words 17 years out loud. Elena Rossi's pen stopped. He wanted you to say it, Clara said, turning to her. In front of Mr. Byrne, in front of me. He needed those exact words in this house tonight, and he couldn't say them himself, because if he says them, he's a traitor explaining himself. If you say them, ma'am, you're a woman confessing. Confessing to what? To 17 years, Clara said. Ma'am, tomorrow morning when this whole city is trying to work out what happened in this house tonight, what's the story going to be? A lawyer changed a word and got caught by a maid. Nobody believes that. That's a joke. She leaned forward. Or Elena Rossi has been sitting on a secret structure for 17 years and finally moved on it, and Victor Hale went down trying to stop her. Evan 24. Elena Rossi stood up so fast her chair hit the floor. That is insane. Is it? Adrian, tell her that's insane. And Adrian Cole didn't say anything. Adrian, nothing. Adrian, you cannot possibly... Sit down, Elena, Adrian said, and the temperature in that room dropped through the floor. 11:26. Don't you do that. Elena's voice had gone somewhere Clara had never heard it go. Don't you sit there and let a girl who's been in this house 5 years put that in your head in 90 seconds. I've known you since you were 26 years old. I know. I sat with you in a car in Cicero for 11 hours. I know. I identified your father. Elena. No, you look at me. Elena Rossi was around the table now and her hands were shaking. 20 minutes ago you said nobody's getting hurt because you're the one who decides. So decide, right now, out loud, in front of her, because if you're going to look at me the way you looked at him tonight, I want it done fast. And Adrian Cole said, I don't know. 11:28. The words landed like a body. You don't know, Elena said. No. After 30 years. After 17 of them with a secret in your mouth, Adrian said, and it was quiet and it was terrible. Elena, you sat in that dining room tonight and told me you read all 62 pages Thursday and it said and. You said it out loud in front of the table, and you were right. And that's the only reason I opened the folder. He stood up. And if you'd said nothing, if you just kept eating, I'd have signed. Did you know that you're the reason I caught it, and you're the person who's been lying to me since 2009, and I have been sitting here for 3 hours, trying to make those two things be the same woman? Elena Rossi's face broke. So no, Adrian said. I don't know, and Victor Hale knew I wouldn't, and that's the whole thing he bought tonight, and it cost him nothing because he was going to lose the paper either way. 11:31. Nobody said anything for a while. Then Clara said quietly, Miss Rossi, don't. Miss Rossi, I want to say one thing and then I'll shut up. You've said enough, honey. You've had a hell of a night. You've said plenty. He'll do it to you too. Elena stopped. Whatever he did to Mr. Cole, whatever he's been doing for 26 years, he's done it to you, Clara said. Because, ma'am, you've been carrying a secret for 17 years and you thought it was loyalty, and tonight you found out it was a job. He gave you that. He handed you a thing to carry and told you it was love, and you carried it for 17 years, and it cost you everything you had with him. She nodded at Adrian. That's not a partner. That's an employer. Elena Rossi stood in the middle of that room with her mouth open, and then she sat down and picked up the pen and said 6 dates. Say them again. 11:48. They worked until 1:45. Elena filled 14 pages. Clara talked in that flat, terrible voice, eyes closed, hands flat, and the things that came out of her were not memories, they were inventory. A phone number a man said out loud in a hallway in 2022. The word Rockford said twice 6 months apart by 2 different people who had never met. A Wednesday in 2023 when Victor Hale left the house at 11 in the morning and came back at 1, and his shoes were wet and it had not rained. At 12:40, Adrian said, "Stop. I'm not done. Clara, stop. There's more. Clara," he came around the table, "your nose is bleeding." 12:41. She hadn't noticed. She put her hand up and it came away red, and she looked at it with complete detachment and said, "That happens. That happens. When I go in for too long, it's fine. It happened when I was a kid. Mama used to say," and then she stopped because her voice had gone, and she sat there with blood on her hand and could not finish the sentence. Adrian Cole took a napkin off the sideboard and handed it to her. "How many did we get?" she said. Elena looked down at 14 pages. 6, she said. "Maybe 7. If Rockford's a person and not a place." Out of 11. Out of 11. And Clara Bennett said, "Then he's still got 4, and I'm out of house." 12:44. "What does that mean?" Adrian said. "It means everything I have, I got standing in this building." Clara pressed the napkin to her face. "Sir, I can only remember what happened in front of me. He didn't do the other 4 in front of me. He did them somewhere else with somebody else, and I was never there, and I can't invent it. So we have 7. 7 pieces of 11, and you don't know which 4 are missing, and Miss Rossi just told us the pieces only make sense together." Clara looked up. "Sir, 7 of 11 isn't most of it. 7 of 11 is nothing. It's a sentence with the verbs taken out." And Adrian Cole said, "Then we don't need 11. We need him to think we have 11. 12:47. Elena set the pen down very slowly. "Adrian, he's upstairs on a bed. He's been sitting on that bed for 3 hours with nothing to do but think, and the one thing he cannot do, the only thing in this entire world Victor Hale cannot do, is know what's happening in this room." Adrian's voice had changed. It had gotten quiet and fast. "Elena, in 26 years, what has that man been afraid of? One thing." Elena's mouth opened, closed. "Say it." "Not knowing," she said. "Not knowing." Adrian turned to Clara. "He doesn't fear jail. He doesn't fear me. He built the 11 because 11 means nobody can ever hold all of it, including him, and you know what that means. It means that for 17 years, Victor Hale has been living inside the one structure on this earth that he himself can't see all of. 12:50. "You want to make him think we've got the 11, Elena said. "I want to make him think we've got the 11. With 7. With 6 and a maybe. And when he asks for proof," and Adrian Cole said, "Then Miss Bennett tells him what he said in the foyer on August 9th, 2021, word for word, and then tells him what he had for lunch." 12:52. Clara said, "Sir, you can do it. Sir, listen to me. You just did it for 3 hours. Mr. Cole." Clara stood up with a bloody napkin in her hand. "Listen. To me. If I walk into a room with that man and open my mouth, he will know inside of 4 sentences exactly how much I have and exactly how much I don't. That's what he does. That's the only thing he does. He's been reading rooms since before I was born." So you can't send me in there to bluff him," Clara said. "You can only send me in there to be honest with him about a thing he doesn't want to be true." Adrian stopped. "And what's that?" he said. And Clara Bennett said that there's a 12th. 12:54. Nobody moved. "A what?" Elena said. "You said it, ma'am, not me. You said it 2 hours ago and you didn't hear yourself." Clara's voice was picking up speed. "You said 11 people who each hold 1 piece and none of them know what the other 10 are holding. And if any one of them stops hearing from Victor, they open their piece and they act on it." "Yes, ma'am, if any of them stops hearing from Victor." Clara looked from Elena to Adrian and back. "Then who tells them?" Silence. "They're compartmented," Clara said. "They don't know each other. They can't call each other. So how does number 4 in Rockford find out that Victor Hale stopped making phone calls? She spread her hands. Somebody tells him. There has to be somebody whose entire job is to know that Victor's gone quiet and go knock on 11 doors. That's not one of the 11, sir. That's the person who runs the 11. 12:56. Adrian Cole sat down. He sat down like his legs had gone. He said he's number 9, Clara said. Everyone in this house has spent 3 hours thinking that was a confession. It wasn't. It was arithmetic. She leaned on the table. Sir, if Victor Hale is one of the 11, then Victor Hale is inside the structure. And a man inside the structure can't be the one who tells the others he's gone quiet. He physically cannot be. So there's someone else. There's someone standing outside all of it watching whose whole job is to wait for silence. Elena Rossi whispered, "Oh my God. And that person's been in this city for 17 years, Clara said. And nobody in this room has ever heard their name. And tonight, at 6 o'clock, 4 hours before I opened that door, a man in a windbreaker sat down on my mother's stairs. 101. Nobody said a word. He wasn't sent by Victor, Adrian said slowly. No, sir. Victor was in this house at 6. Victor was in this house at 4. Yes, sir. So somebody put a man on your mother's stairs before Victor Hale had any reason to be worried about you at all. Adrian's face had gone completely still. Somebody who knew there was going to be a problem tonight before there was a problem tonight. And Clara Bennett said, somebody who's been watching Victor Hale for 17 years, the exact same way I've been watching all of you. 103. And then the door opened and Marcus Burns stood there and his face was wrong and he had a phone in his hand. Boss, Marcus, whatever it is. Boss, he's making the calls. Adrian was up. It's 1 in the morning. He's got until 8. He's not waiting till 8. Marcus was breathing hard. He asked for his phone. I told him no. He said, Marcus, look at your hand. What? Look at your hand. Marcus held up his own hand, and it was shaking. He said, Marcus, look at your hand. You've been standing outside this door for 4 hours, and you're shaking, and that's because you already know. And I said, no what? And he said, Marcus stopped. He said, what? Adrian said. And Marcus Burns said, he said, ask your boss why the maid's mother's file was pulled on Monday. 1:05. Clara Bennett's whole body went cold. Monday, she said. Monday, Marcus said. Not Tuesday, Monday, the day before he ever talked to Rosa. And Adrian Cole turned and looked at Clara, and Clara looked back at him, and the two of them stood in a room at 1 in the morning and arrived at the same place at the same time. Sir, Clara said, he didn't find out about me on Tuesday. No. Somebody handed me to him on Monday. And upstairs in the east guest room with a man outside the door and no phone in his hands, Victor Hale started laughing. 1:06. They heard it through the floor, 2 stories up through a closed door past a man with a gun standing outside it. Victor Hale was laughing, and the sound came down through the house like water finding a crack. Marcus Byron said, Boss, I swear to God if you want me to make that stop, nobody touches him. He's been saying that for 4 hours. Nobody touches him. Boss, he's laughing. I know what he's doing. Adrian was already at the stairs. He's calling me. Clara went after him. Sir, stay down here. Sir, he said my mother's name. Adrian stopped on the 3rd step and turned around, and his face was so tired that Clara almost didn't recognize it. Yes, he said. He did. And that's exactly why he said it. I don't care. Clara. I don't care, sir. She came up 1 step. You said it yourself. He wanted the room. He wanted you looking under your own bed. He's been 3 moves ahead of everybody in this building all night, and every single time somebody in this house has done what he expected, and I'm the only thing in this whole story he didn't plan for. Her chin came up. So take me up there. Let him look at the thing he got wrong. Adrian Cole looked at her for 4 seconds. Then he said, Marcus, open the door. 1:09. Victor Hale was sitting on the edge of the bed with his hands on his knees, exactly the way Marcus had described him 4 hours ago, and his jacket was still buttoned, and he had not loosened his tie, and Clara understood immediately that he had been sitting like that on purpose. A man doesn't sit like that for 4 hours. A man arranges himself like that. He stopped laughing when the door opened. He looked at Adrian, then he looked past Adrian at Clara, and his whole face changed. "Oh," he said, "you brought her. Sit still, Victor." "I'm sitting perfectly still." His eyes stayed on Clara. "Miss Bennett, how's your mother?" Clara said. "She's in a car." "Is she?" Something flickered. "Whose car?" "Mine," Adrian said. "Good." Victor exhaled, and it was so fast and so small that Clara almost missed it, and she caught it, and she filed it because that was what she did. "Good, that's good." 111. Adrian said, "Say it again." "Say what again?" "What you told Marcus. Say it to my face." And Victor Hale said, "Ask your boss why the maid's mother's file was pulled on Monday." "I'm the boss, Victor." "I know." "So you're asking me?" "I'm asking you," Victor said, "because I don't know." 112. Clara felt the room tilt. "You don't know," Adrian said. "Adrian, sit down." "Don't tell me to sit down." "Then stand up. I don't care, but for the love of God, stop performing for the girl and listen to me for 90 seconds because we're running out of night." Victor's voice had lost every bit of its warmth. It had gone flat and fast, and it was the first time all evening that he had sounded like a man in trouble. "I did not pull Ruth Bennett's file." "You told her the number, 206. You said it in a hallway." "Yes." "So you had it." "I had it," Victor said. "I didn't pull it." "That's a distinction for lawyers." "That's the only distinction that matters tonight." Victor leaned forward. "It came to me, Adrian. Monday. It was in a folder on my desk on Monday morning with everything else, and I read it, and I used it, because that's what I am. That's what I've always been. You hand me a thing, and I use it. I've never once in 26 years asked where a piece of paper came from." His jaw worked. "I've been sitting on this bed for 4 hours doing nothing but that arithmetic, and I want to throw up." 114. "You're lying," Adrian said. "Ask her." "What?" Victor looked at Clara. "Ask her. She's been standing there for 5 minutes with a face like a calculator. Miss Bennett, am I lying?" And Clara Bennett said no. Adrian turned on her. "Clara." "He's not lying, sir." Her voice was strange in her own ears. "He said I've never once asked where a piece of paper came from. Sir, that's true. I've watched him take folders from Mrs. Whitaker in the drive for 5 years, and he never once asked her a question. Not one. He just said thank you and put them in the car." "That's not evidence." "No, sir. It's worse than evidence." Clara didn't take her eyes off Victor. "It's a habit, and that man doesn't have habits by accident." Victor Hale looked at her, and there was something in his face that made Clara's skin crawl because it was respect. "See?" he said quietly. "This is what I couldn't get anybody in this house to understand for 26 years. It isn't about who's clever. It's about who's watching the boring parts." 116. Adrian said, "Who put it on your desk?" "Adrian?" "Who put it on your desk, Victor?" "My office receives 40 documents a day." "Who?" "I don't know," Victor said. And for the first time in his entire life in front of 2 witnesses, Victor Hale sounded frightened. "I don't know, kid." And the word kid landed in the middle of that room and just sat there, and nobody picked it up. 117. Adrian walked to the far wall and put both hands against it. "Say the rest of it," he said. "What rest?" "You've been sitting on this bed for 4 hours. You didn't sit here for 4 hours to tell me you don't know something. Say the rest of it." And Victor Hale said, "I was fed." 118. Clara heard Marcus Byrne out in the hall take 1 step closer to the door. "Monday morning," Victor said. "A folder. Household Legal Review Standard, same as every year, except this year there's a page in it that isn't in any other year. Ruth Bennett. St. Ambrose. Tuesdays and Thursdays. 206 on a list. And a note, Adrian. A note in the margin. And the note says, 'This one remembers everything.'" Clara's whole body went cold. "So Tuesday I go into the kitchen," Victor said, "which I have never done in 26 years, and I ask a 23-year-old girl who's the smart one, and she tells me, and she's so proud of you, Miss Bennett. She's so proud, she says, you're smarter than all of them. And Tuesday afternoon, I pulled the working copies." He looked up. "All 4. And I changed a word. 1:20. Adrian didn't turn around. You'd been planning that for 2 years, he said. I'd been thinking about it for 2 years. Victor's voice cracked, and it was so unexpected that Clara flinched. Thinking Adrian? Do you understand the difference? I'm 61 years old. Every man my age has a drawer in his head. You open it at 4 in the morning, and you look at the version of your life where you took what you were owed, and then you close it and you go to work. I've been opening that drawer for 2 years and closing it for 2 years. And Tuesday you didn't close it. Tuesday somebody handed me a reason to hurry. 1:21. Adrian turned around slowly. Say that again. Tuesday, somebody put a piece of paper on my desk that said there's a woman in that house who reads things and doesn't forget them. Victor's hands had come off his knees. They were moving now, and Clara had never seen his hands move. And I read that, and I thought she's going to catch it. Not tonight. Not this deal. Someday. Someday she's going to be dusting a shelf and she's going to see something and the whole drawer in my head is going to fall out onto the floor in front of you. He laughed and it was awful. So I did it Tuesday because I panicked. You don't panic. I don't panic slowly, Victor said. I panic in about 9 seconds and then I look calm for the rest of my life. Adrian, I have been reading rooms since before you were born, and somebody in your house read me. On Monday, with 1 page and 1 sentence in a margin. 1:23. Nobody said anything. Then Clara said quietly, That's why you read it out loud. Victor's head came around. In the dining room, she said, when Mr. Cole told you to read page 46, you read the word and off a page that says, or in front of 14 witnesses, and Mr. Cole spent 3 hours downstairs thinking that was a strategy. Clara took 1 step into the room. It wasn't a strategy, was it? It was the 9 seconds. Victor Hale stared at her. You didn't have a plan, Clara said. You've never had a plan. You had a word and a Tuesday and a drawer in your head, and somebody knew you well enough to know exactly which one of those to push. 1:24, and Victor Hale said yes. Adrian made a sound. It wasn't a word. Yes, Victor said again. Yes, Miss Bennett, that's exactly right, and I have been sitting on this bed for 4 hours getting there, and you did it in 3 minutes standing in a doorway, and I want you to understand that is the single most frightening thing that has ever happened to me. 1:25. The 11, Adrian said. Adrian, you said you're number 9. I am number 9. Then who's the 12th? And the entire room stopped. Victor Hale went absolutely still, and Clara watched it happen, watched the color go out of a 61-year-old man's face in real time, and she knew before he said one word that they had it. What did you say? Victor whispered. 1:26. There's a 12th, Adrian said. There has to be. 11 people who don't know each other who each open their piece when you go quiet. Somebody has to tell them you went quiet. It can't be one of the 11 because they don't know each other. It can't be you because you're the silence. He came off the wall. So who runs it, Victor, 17 years? Who's the mailman? Victor Hale said, there isn't one. Victor, there isn't one, Adrian, because I built it so there wouldn't be one. His voice was rising. It was rising, and Clara had never heard that not once, not in 5 years. That was the entire design. There's no center. Every one of the 11 has a trigger condition. They don't wait for a phone call. They wait for a thing that happens or doesn't happen. If a certain box in a certain bank isn't paid for on a certain date, that's the message. If a certain notice doesn't run in a certain paper on the 1st of January, that's the message. Nobody tells them anything. Nobody has to. That's why it survived 17 years. That's why nobody's ever been able to buy it or break it, because there is nothing to buy and nobody to break. 1:28. Clara's stomach went through the floor. Then somebody found the boxes, she said. Victor turned his head. Somebody found the boxes, Clara said again, and her voice had gone somewhere far away. Sir, Mr. Hale, if the trigger is a payment, then there's a payment, every year, 11 times, for 17 years. Somebody's been paying 11 bills. Victor Hale opened his mouth, and nothing came out. You've been paying 11 bills for 17 years, Clara said, and you don't write things down, and you don't handle paperwork because you're the attorney. You're the man who arranges, and men who arrange do not stand in line at a bank. She took another step. So who pays them? 1:29. Victor Hale said, "My office." "Which person in your office?" "It's automatic. It's a standing—" "Mr. Hale." Clara's voice cut through his like a wire. "Which person?" And Victor Hale sat on the edge of a bed in a house he had built with his own hands and said, "I don't know, 1:30. Adrian Cole started laughing. It was the worst sound Clara had ever heard in that house. 26 years, he said. 26 years, and you built me a machine with no center, so nobody could ever touch it, and you never once asked who mails the letters. Adrian, you never asked where the paper came from, Victor. You just told me. That's your whole life. That's the sentence. Adrian's hands were shaking. You spent 26 years being the only man in Chicago who couldn't be surprised, and the entire time there was somebody standing behind you licking the stamps. Victor Hale put his face in his hands, and Clara Bennett watched the most feared attorney in the state of Illinois break apart on the edge of a bed at 1:30 in the morning, and she felt absolutely nothing. And then horribly she felt sorry for him, and she hated herself for it. 1:32. Get Elena, Adrian said. Marcus went. Adrian? Victor's voice came out of his hands. Adrian, listen to me. Whoever it is, they've had 17 years. I know. No, you don't. Victor looked up. 17 years of knowing what's in 11 boxes. Adrian, I don't know what's in 11 boxes. I know what I put in them in 2009, and I have not looked since, because the whole point was never to look. Whoever's been paying those bills has been standing next to the only complete copy of your life that has ever existed for 17 years, and I handed them the key and called it a defense. 1:34. Elena Rossi came through the door and stopped dead when she saw Victor's face. What happened to him? He found out he's an employee, Clara said. Elena's head snapped around, and for a second Clara thought she'd gone too far, and then Elena Rossi laughed, one syllable, bitter as a pill. Welcome to the club, she said. Elena, Adrian was already moving. The contract, page 46. In the event of the principal's death or incapacity, control passes to the designated heirs of Adrian Cole or the trustee of record. I know what it says. Who are my designated heirs? 1:35. Elena Rossi stopped, and Clara watched it hit her. She watched a 50-year-old woman who had survived 30 years in the worst business in America get hit in the chest by 4 words and go gray. Elena. Adrian. Who are my designated heirs? You don't have children, Elena said. I know I don't have children. You don't have children, and your father's dead, and your mother's dead, and you've got no brothers and no sisters. Her voice had gone very small. Adrian, there's one name in that schedule. There's been one name in that schedule since 2009. 1:36. Nobody breathed. Say it, Adrian said, and Elena Rossi said, Dominic. 1:37. Victor Hale's head came up so fast it looked like it hurt. No, he said. Victor, no. He was on his feet. No, absolutely not. Dominic Cole is a drunk. Dominic Cole has never had an original thought in his entire life. I have watched that man spill wine on himself at 4 separate weddings. Sit down, Victor. Adrian, I'm telling you, he's a clown. Sit down. And then Adrian said very slowly, Victor, listen to what you just said. Listen to your own mouth. You just told me a man is harmless because he spills things. Victor Hale stopped with his mouth open. That's it, Adrian said. That's the whole trick. You just did it out loud. 1:39. And Clara Bennett said, Oh, God. Everyone turned. Miss Bennett. Or, Clara said. What? Or, she had her hands pressed flat against her own head. Sir, everybody in this house has spent 5 hours thinking that word was Mr. Hale's. It says the designated heirs or the trustee of record. Everybody looked at the second half. Nobody looked at the first. Silence. And means Dominic and Victor have to agree, Clara said. Or means Dominic doesn't need Victor at all. 1:40. Adrian Cole sat down on the end of the bed next to the man who had tried to rob him. Neither of them noticed. He didn't feed me to Victor to hurt me, Clara said. Her voice was going faster and faster, and she couldn't slow it down. He fed me to Victor to make Victor move. He knew about the drawer. Ma'am, you said it. Mr. Hale's been thinking about it for 2 years, and people who think about things for 2 years talk about them not out loud, but they talk about them. A man like Dominic sits at that table getting laughed at for 26 years, and what does a man like that do? He listens. Nobody listens harder than a man everybody laughs at. Elena Rossi sat down on the floor, actually sat down right there against the doorframe in a $4,000 dress. He put a page on Victor's desk on Monday, Clara said. 1 page, a maid, a hospital, a note in the margin. And he knew that would push a man with a drawer into opening it. And Victor opens the drawer on Tuesday and changes and Victor thinks he's giving himself a key. And he's giving Dominic one, Adrian said. He's giving Dominic one, Clara said. And Dominic's name was already in the schedule, and it's been in the schedule since 2009, and nobody in this house has thought about it for 17 years because it's Dominic. 142, Victor Hale said quietly. Then why did he want you to catch it? Clara stopped. What? Think, Miss Bennett. Think all the way through. Victor's eyes were terrible. If Dominic gets me to put or on that page and Adrian signs it and never notices, then Dominic wins in 20 years when I die or when Adrian dies. He waits. That's fine. That's a plan. So why does he also put a note in the margin telling me there's a woman in this house who catches everything? Why does he light the fuse and then tell me there's a fire alarm? 143. And Clara Bennett said, because he didn't want Mr. Cole to sign it. Nobody moved. He wanted him to catch it, Clara said, and her voice was shaking now. That's why the note. The note wasn't for you, Mr. Hale. The note was so you'd be scared enough to change the page on Tuesday, and then the note did the second half of its job because I'm the woman who catches things, and everybody in this city was about to find out. But he loses the oar. He doesn't need the oar. Clara's hands came down. Sir, he doesn't need the paper at all. Look what he got instead. He got you throwing 14 of the most dangerous men in Chicago out of a dining room at 9 o'clock at night. He got Miss Rossi confessing 17 years in front of witnesses. He got Mrs. Whitaker admitting she's been handing out the staff for 27 years. He got Mr. Burns shaking outside a door. She was breathing hard. He got the whole house on the floor in one night, Mr. Cole. He didn't want to inherit an empire in 20 years. He wanted one that was already broken by breakfast. 145. Marcus Burns said from the hallway. Boss? Nobody answered. Boss? Adrian said, what? And Marcus Byron said, Dominic's been in the West Room with the Detroit table for 4 hours and 20 minutes. 146. Adrian Cole was up off that bed and through the door before anybody moved. Adrian! Elena scrambled after him. Adrian, stop if you walk into that room right now. Elena, get off me. If you walk into that room right now, you are one man with a story, and he is one man with 4 hours. She got in front of him, 50 years old, and she got in front of him in a hallway and put both hands on his chest. 4 hours, Adrian. Alone. With Bruno and the Detroit table and your father's scotch. What do you think he's been telling them? Adrian stopped. He's been telling them, Elena said, that Adrian Cole blew up a $50 million deal because a maid whispered something in his ear and then locked his lawyer of 26 years in a bedroom and then woke up 19 servants at 10 o'clock at night and told them all his business in a kitchen. 148. Nobody said anything. He's not been lying, Elena said quietly. That's the thing. He hasn't had to lie once. He's just been describing tonight. Adrian Cole put his back against the wall. How bad, he said. Bruno flew in from Detroit. He's been sitting in a room for 4 hours watching this house fall apart. Adrian, he came here to be made rich, and instead he's watched a mafia boss get outthought by his own housekeeper's paperwork. Elena's voice was flat. By sunrise, this whole city knows you can't hold a room. That's it. That's the whole business. You can't hold a room. 149. And Clara Bennett said, then don't hold it. Every head turned. Miss Bennett. Sir? She came down the hall. You keep trying to fix tonight. You can't fix tonight. Tonight happened. 14 men watched it. You can't unwatch it. Thank you, that's very helpful. Sir, listen to me. Clara stopped in front of him. He didn't beat you tonight because he was smarter. He beat you because he knew exactly what you'd do. Every single move you've made since 9 o'clock, he called it. You threw the room out. You locked Victor up. You went looking for the traitor. You interrogated your own housekeeper. Her voice dropped. Sir, he's not playing you. He's just watching a man do what that man always does. 1:51. Adrian Cole said, So what do I do? And Clara said, Something you've never done. Which is what? Lose. 1:52. Elena Rossi said, Absolutely not. Ma'am, absolutely not. Do you know what happens to men in this business who look weak for one night? Do you have any idea, honey, this isn't an office? Nobody puts him on a performance plan. Miss Rossi, I've been invisible for 5 years, Clara said. I'm the world expert on what happens to people nobody's watching. That stopped Elena cold. Nothing happens, Clara said. That's what happens. That's the whole secret. When people decide you're finished, they stop looking at you. And when people stop looking at you, you can do absolutely anything you want. 1:54. Nobody spoke. Then Victor Hale said from the doorway of the room he was supposedly a prisoner in, She's right. Victor shut up. She's right, and it kills me, and she's right. He was holding the doorframe. Adrian, every single thing I have ever taught you was about how to win a room. That's what I gave you for 26 years, and it's the reason you're standing in a hallway at 2 a.m. with nothing. Because a man who has to win every room can be steered by anybody who knows which room to put him in. 1:55. Adrian looked at Clara. Say the rest, he said. You go in there, Clara said. Right now. And you tell them the truth. Which truth? That you've been robbed, that you don't know by who, that your lawyer's upstairs and you can't prove anything, and that the deal is dead and you're sorry you wasted their night. Clara's voice was steady. You look them in the eye and you tell them you got beat by a piece of paper and you don't know what to do. That's suicide. That's Tuesday, Clara said. Sir, that's every day of my life. You go in that room and you be nobody for 11 minutes and Dominic Cole is going to sit there and watch it happen and he is going to be so happy that he stops watching. 1:57. And then what? Adrian said. And then he does something, Clara said. Sir, he has to. He's been waiting 17 years for one night, and this is it, and it's 2 a.m, and he is out of runway. He didn't burn this house down so he could wait another week. Whatever he's got, it happens before breakfast. And if he doesn't, then you've lost a deal, Clara said. You haven't lost a house. 1:58. Elena Rossi said, Adrian, don't. Adrian, I have to say it and then I'll shut up. She was very pale. She's been in this building 5 years and she's telling you to walk into a room and hand a knife to a man you're not sure about. Yes. That's what I said to you about Victor in 2009, and you didn't listen, and now look. And Adrian Cole said, Elena, in 2009 you didn't say anything about Victor. That's the entire problem. Elena Rossi's mouth closed. 2:01. He went in alone. Clara stood in the hallway outside the West Room with Marcus Byrne beside her and heard it through the door. And it was the strangest 11 minutes of her life. She heard Adrian Cole say, Gentlemen, there's no deal. She heard the room explode. She heard a man with a Detroit accent say a sentence about Adrian's mother that made Marcus Byrne's hand move toward his jacket, and she heard Adrian say nothing at all. She heard Bruno say, 26 years and you get taken by a paralegal's typo. She heard Adrian say yes, just yes, 2:06. And then she heard Dominic Cole's voice, Hey, 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 take it easy on him. Warm, loud, generous. Come on, fellas. That's my cousin. That's family. He's had a rough night. And Clara Bennett stood in a hallway at 6 minutes past 2 a.m. and felt every hair on her arms stand up. You hear that? She whispered. Marcus said, Hear what he's sticking up for him. Marcus, listen to the room. And Marcus Byrne listened. And the room, which had been screaming 90 seconds ago, had gone quiet, and it had gone quiet for Dominic. 2:07. Oh my God, Marcus said. Yeah. They're listening to him. They're listening to him, Clara said. And they've been listening to him for 4 hours, 2:10. Adrian came out at 10 past 2, and he did not look at anybody. He walked straight down the hall and into the library, and put his hands flat on the table and stood there with his head down. Well, Elena said, he offered me a lawyer. What? Dominic, in front of Bruno, in front of everybody. Adrian's voice was completely empty. He put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Cousin, you're rattled. Let me get you somebody. He said he knows a guy. He said he'd handle it." Nobody said anything. He said, "Adrian, you shouldn't have to think tonight," Adrian said. And Bruno nodded. 212, Clara said, "Sir." He said I shouldn't have to think. "Sir, listen. 26 years and my cousin put his hand on my shoulder in front of the Detroit table and told me I shouldn't have to think, and every man in that room nodded, and not one of them thought it was strange." Adrian's hands were white on the wood. "Do you understand what that is? That's not a betrayal. That's a diagnosis. He wasn't planting anything, he was harvesting." He looked up. "Elena, read me the word." "What word?" "The word on page 46, the condition. Read it." And Elena Rossi said, "In the event of the principal's death or incapacity." 213. "Incapacity," Adrian said. The room went absolutely silent. "Victor told me tonight in front of everybody, he said death was never the plan. Death is slow." Adrian sat down. I thought that was a threat. It wasn't a threat. It was a description of a thing he'd already been told. Clara felt the floor come up. "Sir," she said, "how does incapacity get proved?" "2 doctors, Elena said automatically, and then she heard herself and her hand went over her mouth. 2 doctors, Adrian said. 2:15. "Elena, who's my doctor?" "Adrian, who is my doctor?" "Ferris," Elena whispered. "Dr. Ferris, since 2009. And Adrian Cole said, "And who called Dr. Ferris 4 hours ago and told him to come to this house in the middle of the night?" 2:16. Elena Rossi stood up so fast she knocked the chair over. "That was me, Adrian. That was me you told me to. You said get Ferris out of bed." "I know. You told me to, for the machine, for her mother." "I know, Elena." Adrian's voice was very quiet. "That's what I'm telling you. He didn't have to do a thing. I called my own doctor to this house at 2 in the morning, on the night I threw 14 witnesses out of a dining room and locked my attorney in a bedroom and woke up my entire staff to tell them I'd been robbed by a word." Nobody breathed. "How does a man look incapacitated?" Adrian said. "He behaves erratically, in front of witnesses, all night, and then his own physician arrives at his own request and sees it." 2:18. Clara Bennett put her hand on the back of a chair. "Sir," she said, "where is Dr. Ferris right now?" Silence. "Marcus," Adrian said. "Where's Ferris?" And Marcus Burns said, "He got here at 1:40. "Where is he?" "He's in the blue room on 2, Marcus said. "With Mrs. Bennett." 2:19. Clara Bennett was out the door. "Bennett." She hit the stairs so hard she went down on one knee on the 3rd step and got up without feeling it. She heard Marcus behind her, heard Adrian shouting her name, and she did not stop. She did not slow down. She took the stairs 2 at a time in a maid's uniform at 19, minutes past 2 in the morning, and hit the door of the blue room with her shoulder. Her mother was sitting up in bed with a cup of tea, and a small gray-haired man in a cardigan was sitting in a chair beside her, writing on a clipboard. He looked up. "Miss Bennett," he said, "your mother's fine. Blood pressure's better than mine." 2:20. Clara couldn't speak. Ruth Bennett said, "Baby, what on earth? Mama, get up." Clara Louise, "Get up, Mama, right now." And Dr. Ferris stood and put his clipboard down and said in a mild voice, "Miss Bennett, I've been Adrian's physician for 17 years. Whatever you think is happening here." And Clara Bennett said, 17. 2:21. The room went still. "You said 17, Clara said. "I've known him 17 years, yes." "Miss Rossi said you've been his doctor since 2009. "That's right. That's 17 years. "Yes." Dr. Ferris smiled patient kind, the way a man smiles at somebody's daughter at 2 in the morning. "Miss Bennett, you've had a long night. Sit down." And Clara Bennett said, "Everyone keeps telling me to sit down tonight." 2:22. Adrian Cole came through the door with Marcus behind him. "Ferris." "Adrian." The little man turned unhurried. "Good God, look at you. When's the last time you slept?" And Clara Bennett said, "Sir, don't answer that." Everything stopped. Dr. Ferris looked at her, and Clara watched a mild gray-haired man in a cardigan look at her with absolutely nothing behind his eyes for about a quarter of a second, and then the mildness came back like a curtain dropping. "I'm sorry," he said. "You asked him when he last slept," Clara said. That's the first thing you said, not what's wrong, not who's hurt. You walked into a house at 2 a.m. that has been screaming for 5 hours, and the first thing out of your mouth is a question about his sleep. 2:24. Dr. Ferris said, "Miss Bennett, I'm a physician." "You're a witness," Clara said. Adrian Cole did not move. Marcus Byrne did not move. 2009, Clara said. Mr. Hale built the 11 in 2009. Miss Rossi found out in 2009. And you became his doctor in 2009. That's a coincidence. It's the same year, sir. Everything in this house is the same year. Clara took a step. Who hired you? Adrian hired me. And Adrian Cole said quietly, "No, I didn't." 2:25. The room dropped 10 degrees. Adrian, I didn't hire you. Adrian's voice was very calm and very slow. I have never hired a doctor in my life. You came to the house. Somebody sent you. Somebody said, "This is your guy now." That was 17 years ago. Who sent you, Ferris? And Dr. Ferris said, "Victor Hale." 2:26. Nobody moved. Then Clara said, "No, he didn't." Ferris's head turned. "Mr. Hale's upstairs," Clara said, sitting on a bed with his hands on his knees, and about 40 minutes ago, he told us that he doesn't know who pays 11 bills a year, and he doesn't know who put a folder on his desk on Monday, and he's been sitting up there for 5 hours, realizing that he's been an errand boy in his own building. She took another step. "You just picked the one name in this house," Clara said, "that nobody in this house believes anymore. Sir, that's very clever. That's the cleverest thing anybody's said tonight." Her voice dropped. "How long have you had that answer ready?" 2:28. Dr. Ferris said nothing. "Marcus," Adrian said. "His bag." "Adrian, that is a violation of—" "His bag, Marcus." Marcus Byron picked up the doctor's bag off the floor and opened it and looked inside and stopped. "Boss." "What?" And Marcus Byrne said, "There's 2 of everything." 2:29. "What? There's 2 clipboards." Marcus's voice had gone hoarse. "There's 2 forms. Boss, there's a second form in here and it's already got a date on it, and the date is today." Ruth Bennett said, "Clara, it's all right, Mama." "Baby, what is this?" "It's all right, Mama. Drink your tea." Clara did not take her eyes off the small, gray-haired man in the cardigan. "Dr. Ferris, what's the second signature line for—" 2:30. And Dr. Ferris straightened up, and the mildness went away and it did not come back, and what was underneath it was so ordinary that Clara understood in 1 second why nobody had ever seen him. 2 physicians, he said. "It requires 2. Nobody spoke. "That's not a confession," Ferris said pleasantly. "That's a statute. Illinois requires 2 independent physician certifications for a determination of incapacity in a trust of this size. I carry 2 forms because I have carried 2 forms to every house call I have ever made for 17 years, because the day I don't carry 2 is the day I need them." He picked up his coat. "Am I free to go?" 2:31. Adrian Cole said, "Who's the second doctor?" "I don't know." Ferris. "I genuinely don't know," Ferris said. "That's not my end." And Clara Bennett said, "Sir, that's true." Adrian's head snapped around. "What? That's true, sir?" Clara's hands had gone cold. "He's not lying. Look at him. He's not lying because he's not the 12th either." 2:32. "He's a piece," Clara said. "He's one of 11. Sir, we've been looking for a 12th all night, and we've been so busy looking for a mastermind that nobody's asked the obvious thing." She turned. "Dr. Ferris, what's your number?" Dr. Ferris looked at her, and then he smiled, and it was the last time anybody in that house ever saw him do it. 6, he said. 2:33. Clara Bennett said, "Then who's 4? And Dr. Ferris said, "I have no idea, Miss Bennett. That's the design." "Then how do you know when to sign?" "Because on a certain day of a certain year, a certain envelope arrives at my office with a certain amount of money in it, and if it ever stops arriving, I stop being a doctor and start being a witness." He buttoned his coat. "It's been arriving for 17 years. It arrived Monday." 2:34. Everything stopped. "Monday," Adrian said. "Monday," Ferris said. "Same as always. Who signs the envelope?" "Nobody signs an envelope, Mr. Cole." And Clara Bennett said, "Who delivers it?" 2:35. Dr. Ferris paused with his hand on his coat button. "A young man," he said, "in a windbreaker." 236. Nobody breathed. "He's been bringing it for years," Ferris said. "Very polite, says good morning, never says anything